Chapter 50. Lijo, or Lijo for short, was named after the hero of the period of destruction and General Haven Renault of the early New Era. In Lijo, the surname Renault was proof of identity. In the continent of Renault, people would often see people with the surname Renault in political, military, financial, and other news. However, what the public was most interested in was not these high-ranking people in the military, political, or business world, but rather the young master of the Renault family, Zéro Renault, who was always a hot topic in the entertainment industry. Zéro Renault was the youngest grandson of the current governor of Lijo. Although the governor already had great-grandchildren, he still favored this youngest grandson the most and indulged him. In the eyes of the public, Zéro Renault was a willful hedonist. He came from a high family background and was rich. He did not do proper work and spent all his time chasing after girls. After graduation, he had opened a film company called Wireless Media. However, even people who did not pay attention to the entertainment industry knew that this company was completely opened by this young master for fun. The films he invested in, shot, and produced were all for the sake of promoting his girlfriends. Up until now, Wireless Media had produced 7 films, and this young master had also changed girlfriends 7 times in the past 2 years. People jokingly called Zéro Young Master, not because he was the youngest of his generation in the Renault family. The so-called young master was just a mockery of his extravagant ways of doing things. Everyone in Lijo knew that as long as it was a movie produced by Wireless Media, it would be a bad movie in terms of plot. The plot of every movie was relatively simple, so simple that one could guess the ending just by looking at the background introduction at the beginning. Nothing new. There was no logic at all. In the new era, where the internet was so advanced, film production was much simpler. The number of films was exploding. However, some of the larger platforms on the internet were also particular about restrictions. Of course, in the face of power and wealth, these restrictions would be diluted. For example, the movies produced by young Master Zéro's Wireless Media Company were clearly rated as bad movies, but every single one of them had excellent publicity channels, and many people watched them. Every single one of them did well at the box office. Although they were not as good as other popular movies, they were still able to break even. However, the reason why the netizens were so happy to ridicule him was because this young master did not care about what people said about him on the internet. Gradually, the netizens became bolder. Every time Wireless Media's movies were released, they would go watch them and express their emotions. Of course, most of them would ridicule and criticize the movies. But even if they were criticized like shit, the number of people who watched them was never low. They would still watch and criticize every movie that came out. One of the reasons this phenomenon existed was because of young Master Lay's fame. Netizens wanted to see what kind of lousy movie this famous hedonist from Lijo had filmed so that they could use it for entertainment. Furthermore, there was another important reason why many people chose to watch their company's movies. The investment was huge, and the scenes were realistic. The Renault family was wealthy. Young Master Zéro did not have high expectations for his films, but he had high expectations for the setting and viewing effects. He liked movies with big scenes and grandiose grandeur, so the films he invested in were all grand and imposing. In the new era, technology was advancing too quickly. Even in a small room, it was possible to film realistic scenes in outer space. All digital special effects made it look like the real thing at first glance. However, experienced netizens could always find inconsistencies in these seemingly realistic scenes. There were too many such movies that used computer special effects. Thus, some people had formed a mindset to specifically seek out movies that were large-scale and had a lot of actual shooting. And one reason these people chose Wireless Media was that when the company filmed, they used real things, whether it was guns or flying cars or spaceships. For example, in the previous movie, young Master Zéro had rented a spaceship and 10 fighter jets from the military. A few scenes had even been filmed in outer space. Actually, Zéro wasn't really particular about this. He just felt that the Renault family had to be different in some way. Everyone else used computer effects, but he used real guns and bullets. He felt that if he didn't make a big investment and make a big move, he wouldn't be worthy of the Renault family name. Today, this young master of the Renault family had found his 8th girlfriend, and Wireless Media was investing in the production of their 8th movie. This was a cliché movie about the hero rescuing the damsel in distress. In the past, this young master would invite famous actors to support his girlfriend, and when he was in the mood, he would make a cameo appearance. This time, however, he didn't want to make a cameo appearance. Instead, he wanted to act himself to satisfy his craving. Thus, the investment for Wireless Media's 8th movie was even bigger. For this reason, the young master had rented 3 battleships and close to 50 fighter jets. Of course, the pilots of the battleships and fighter jets were all military personnel. Even if Zero was willful, he wouldn't be so foolish as to let a non-professional pilot the battleships and fighter jets. Otherwise, if they were damaged, his father would skin him alive. As for this movie, when Zero had asked his father for resources, he had already thought of a reason: to help promote the military, attract more young people to join the military, and reduce the number of deserters. In the early days of the new era, there had been a hard and fast rule. Everyone, regardless of gender, had to serve a minimum of 2 years in the military upon reaching adulthood. However, after 200 years of this rule, the minimum period was reduced to 1 year. Even now, many people would use all sorts of methods to find loopholes and escape from military service. A few days ago, there had been many cases of deserters in Lijo. Among them, quite a few famous idols and celebrities had been involved. His father didn't believe Zero's reason for helping to promote the military. Unfortunately, Zero had already convinced his grandfather, the governor. No matter how unwilling his father was, he had to help make the arrangements. Because of this, he had been ridiculed by others in the military. They had rolled their eyes at him and said even more nasty things behind his back. Someone had once joked that Zero was a person used to cheat his father. This time, because the investment was even bigger and more fighter jets had been rented, it had stirred up a lot of discussion in Lijo's entertainment circle. Naturally, many people saw this as an opportunity. Regardless of how lousy the movie was, there would definitely be a lot of people watching it, at least more than the previous 7 times. Being able to participate in the movie was a great opportunity to show one's face. Many entertainment companies wanted to send people in. Besides actors and actresses, music producers were also taking advantage of the opportunity to present their own works. Many even lowered their prices to recommend themselves. Actually, Zero didn't really care for any of them, but there had to be a piece that was worthy of his presence. After some consideration, Zero decided to settle for the biggest name composer. Just then, the piece that had caused a sensation in the medical world to treat whole virus patients piqued Zero's interest. He sent someone to search for Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach. Downloads weren't available in Lijo, but Zero had other ways to do it. After hearing about it, he sent someone to contact Silver Wing Media in Yenzhou. He liked the style of the 2 movements. If he continued, the 3rd movement would probably be more in line with his preferred style. He wouldn't use music that had already been released. After all, too many people had heard it before. It wouldn't make it look any better. He was going to appear in the 8th movie. His grand entrance had to be a piece no one had ever heard before. It had to be an impressive piece. Only this sort of background music befitted his status. Most big-budget movies would hire professionals to create a special soundtrack based on the plot and setting of the movie. This was the so-called customization privilege. That was why Zero wanted to get in touch with Silver Wing and ask the composer of the 2 movements to compose a soundtrack. Unfortunately, Silver Wing rejected the request without hesitation. The reason was that the composer was working on the 3rd movement and did not have the time. Zero wasn't happy, but Silver Wing's rejection was straightforward. There was nothing he could do. Zero could rely on his family background to do as he pleased in Lijo, but Yenzhou wouldn't give him face so easily. After some hesitation, Zero asked Silver Wing when they would be releasing the 3rd movement. They estimated it to be in January next year. That would be the time when their 8th movie would be out. Zero decided to book the 3rd movement immediately. Zero's original intention was to buy the entire 3rd movement. When the time came, the 3rd movement wouldn't be released online in Yenzhou. For this, they could pay more. However, Silver Wing rejected the offer bluntly. Not selling. Zero was so angry that he cursed the entire day at the office. He couldn't buy the 3rd movement no matter how much money he offered. His assistants and agent tried to persuade him to give up. There are many composers in Lijo who create this type of music. If you don't like one, listen to a few more and you'll find someone you like, Zero's agent said earnestly. For this movie, the budget had already been exceeded by a lot. It was just a soundtrack. There were so many custom soundtrack studios in Lijo. Any reputable one would do. It was a lousy movie anyway. Zero just needed to have fun acting in the movie. What was the point of being so particular? Zero's agent was also depressed. Zero's investment in so many movies with no substance, and no reputation had already been met with opposition from the rest of the Renault family. He had already been summoned by a few Renaults to advise Zero to restrain himself and stop dragging the family down. Unfortunately, Zero's words carried little weight. Young Master Zero didn't listen to him. As for the soundtrack, Zero persisted. Wireless Media negotiated with Silver Wing many times and finally came to an agreement. The soundtrack would still be used, but they would only buy exclusive rights for a month. During this month, the third movement would be released as planned in Yenzhou. In Lijo, however, the release would be delayed for a month until Wireless Media's 8th movie stopped screening. In addition, Silver Wing offered 10 million. Zero agreed. Zero's agent wanted to hug the table and cry. Even in Lijo, when they had made a huge investment in an air combat movie, they had found a well-known music studio to customize the soundtrack for the movie, but it had only cost around 3 million. Plus, they had bought out the rights. They had the entire rights to the soundtrack, which meant that if they used it in the movie, they could continue to use it in other movies without having to pay any additional fees. But now, they had gotten a price of 10 million from Silver Wing Media in Yenzhou, and it was only for a short month of exclusive rights. Where did Silver Wing get the confidence to make such an offer? And Zero had agreed. What was going on in his head? Did money fly in by itself? They really didn't know how tight finances were. Young Master, should we reconsider? Zero's agent continued to persuade. No need. Let's do it this way. Let's speed up filming. The day the third movement is released in Yenzhou will be the day our movie opens. He did not want his background music to be heard on other platforms. But this price and terms, Zero's agent tried his best to persuade Zero to change his mind. Agreed. Zero was already annoyed by this. He wanted to drive over to the set early to ask when he would be appearing. His stunt double had been the one filming before that. Zero's agent wiped his face when he saw the impatience on Zero's face. How vexing. Spending so much money on a song with a deadline was insane. If anyone in the industry found out, they would laugh their heads off. They could not afford to cut anything else. He knew that this young master had high expectations for production. Now, not only could they not cut back on the music, they had to increase the budget. What a stubborn fellow. Oh, what other requests did they make? Zero asked. Silver Wing said that the composer of the third movement requested that if we wanted to use the third movement soundtrack, it had to be used in that scene in the movie and not anywhere else, Zero's assistant reminded him. Zero looked at the scene his assistant had arranged and was amused. Isn't this the scene we planned from the start? This is where I make my grand entrance. Yes. That's why Wireless Media agreed. The assistant replied cautiously. It was just a scene, and it wasn't even the complete song. Yet Silver Wing had offered 10 million. Only an idiot like Zero would agree to that. Zero's agent thought to himself, 10 million. Did they really think they were buying gold? Seeing his agent's conflicted expression, Zero laughed. Look at how stingy you are. It's not that I'm stingy, Senior Master. It's 10 million. If the soundtrack really doesn't suit your entrance, then change it to another song. Use the one you picked earlier as a backup, then change it to another song. Easy for him to say, 10 million had been fed to a dog? Isn't that a loss? Zero's agent was reluctant. So be it. I can still afford it, Zero said casually. Zero's agent cursed in his heart. Yes, you're a Renault. 10 million is like $1,000. Our hearts tremble when we hear that. But considering the profits from the previous 7 movies, even if this 10 million was lost, it was not a loss. This was why Zero had been so stubborn. He had already recouped his capital. After deducting the expenses, he had a decent amount of money. He could still continue to fool around in the entertainment industry. Is it worth it? Zero's agent still felt the pinch. Are you trying to say that a bad movie isn't worth spending so much money on music? Zero squinted at his agent. Zero's agent laughed awkwardly. So you know it's going to be a bad movie too, he thought to himself. Have you heard of a saying? Zero asked. What? Zero's agent and assistant listened attentively. Chapter 51. Actually, Zero did not feel much towards netizens who said that all the films he had invested in were trash. He also knew that the films he had invested in did not have what people called nutrition and did not have any substance. However, he liked these kinds of films. They were simple, straightforward, big scenes, and enjoyable to watch. Most importantly, they could make his girlfriend happy, and he would feel good as well. When he had just graduated, Zero had planned to start a movie company. He had only intended to play with the mood. He had not thought much about anything else and had been prepared to lose money. Who would have thought that he would actually break even? Thus, Zero became addicted. No matter how the media and the public criticized him, he continued to act according to his nature. As for other people's comments, who cared? In his uncle's words, how can you make a living if you have no shame? Now, he did not want to watch from the sidelines anymore. He wanted to personally take part in a luxurious blockbuster romance and become an omnipotent hero who saved the world. Everyone dreamed of being a hero. Zero was actually very envious of his brothers and sisters in the military, but he had no choice. He could not bear the hardships and did not want to go in and suffer. Thus, he could only make his dreams come true through movies. It was much simpler that way. For this reason, he was prepared to throw money at it. He had bought 10 million for his own soundtrack. Even if it went to waste, he was willing. After all, it was a movie made with money. If he was not satisfied, then so be it. Actually, he also wanted to poach the composer of Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach from Silver Wing and have him tailor-made background music for him, but Silver Wing had hidden the composer too well. He could only wait. If the composer's music satisfied him, he would spend money to poach the composer. If not, he would blacklist both Silver Wing and the composer and prevent them from working with them in the future. Zero was a spendthrift, but that did not mean he was stupid. If he did not get a satisfactory return, he would not give a single cent. As for the plot of the movie, he did not care. It was a movie. As long as it was enjoyable, the plot did not matter. It was all about fighting monsters to save the world. This year, ordinary people would fight monsters. Next year, mutants would fight monsters. The year after that, superhumans would fight monsters. The year after that, monsters would fight monsters. Wouldn't it all be the same plot? In this 8th movie, he planned to fight monsters in mechanical armor. How cool would that be? In any case, he just had to show his face and act cool after his substitute finished the fight. It was very easy. Zero even personally gave the new movie a rather awe-inspiring name. God of War. Someone once sneered after hearing the title of the film. Heh, how shameless. God of War? Does his great-grandfather know? Zero's great-grandfather, who was also the biological father of the current Lijo governor, had been part of Lijo's famous War God unit when he was young. His military exploits were illustrious, and he had once been the deputy commander of Lijo's military district. The old master was already very old, more than 190 years old. Long after his son had become Lijo's governor, the old master had completely stopped managing affairs. However, his influence was still there. Every year, some of his old subordinates would go to visit him. Every time Zero mobilized military equipment for a movie, Zero's father would be pushed around, but his position remained stable. It wasn't entirely because of the governor. The people in the military still respected the old master. As long as Zero did not go overboard and was willing to fork out money, they would choose to turn a blind eye. However, Zero did not feel that there was anything wrong with the title of God of War. He was going to play the lead role himself. If he did not give himself an awesome image, would it be a waste of his hard work? As he was thinking this, Zero's agent left to answer a phone call and hurriedly came looking for him. Senior Master, something has happened. Zero's agent looked gloomy. What is it now? Zero asked. King of Snipers has been brought forward to January 1st. Zero's agent could not be blamed for his anxiousness. Previously, they had dared to release the movie in January because there had been no strong competition in January. All the movies were low budget. Given Zero's ability to create buzz in the entertainment industry, they were not worried about ticket sales. After all, their goal was not high. Zero himself was a walking billboard. Too many people had their eyes on him. Even in the other continents, there were topics about him. Lijo Young Master's new girlfriend exposed. Uncover the young masters from all continents that you shouldn't provoke. This year's Mr. Celebrity of the 12 continents has been announced. Young Master Zero has been Lijo's Mr. Celebrity. There were too many such news. Although Zero had not sung or acted in the past and did not have any other outstanding talent, the constant talk about him made him a celebrity with a strong sense of presence in Lijo. This time, news of Zero's participation in the movie had been in the entertainment industry news for a few days. It had garnered a lot of attention, so Zero's agent was not worried that no one would buy it. This was the first time this senior master was starring in a movie. There were bound to be many curious people. They did not expect the movie to explode at the box office. They just wanted to break even. But now, King of Snipers, which had originally been scheduled to be released in February, had actually been brought forward by a month. Zero's agent felt that this was to deal with Zero. King of Snipers was produced by two big companies in Lijo and had several well-known stars in the cast. It was rumored that it was going to win all sorts of awards. Anticipation had been high. The kind of movie that took into account box office and awards had a deeper meaning in its content. It had more substance and more depth. There was content, strong actors, and a big investment. Even a layman would know that it would make money. The movie's reputation would not be bad. That was why when King of Snipers had been announced in February, they had rejoiced that they would not have to go up against this big monster. That was great. But now, King of Snipers had actually been brought forward. What were they to do? Fortunately, they had not set a release date for the movie. Previously, it had been announced that it would be released in January. Now that it had been moved to February, it was fine. All they had to do was come up with a few excuses. Zero also received a call from his family. "Hello, Uncle. What's up?" "Zero, did you hear about King of Snipers being brought forward? Push it back by a month." Before the person on the other end of the call, Zero hung up. He sat in his chair in silence. In less than a minute, he received another call. Zero looked at the caller ID and answered the call. "Hello, Aunt. Why are you calling me so urgently? If it's about the movie, don't talk about it." "Zero, don't be stubborn." Zero immediately disconnected the call and smashed the communicator. The assistant did not dare to breathe too loudly. She moved over to pick up the phone in case the young master wanted to use it again. Zero was furious. Everyone was trying to persuade him to take a step back. But did they think he was stupid? Without the consent of the Renaults, would the person behind King of Snipers dare to bring forward the release date? Zero's guess was right. This had indeed been tacitly agreed upon by the rest of the Renault family. They wanted Renault to see reality clearly. His lucky success had actually been given to him by someone else. Right now, they wanted to poke a hole in his inflated heart, give him a blow, and temper his character. Zero had attracted too much hatred. He had publicly scolded celebrities from several entertainment companies. Now, those companies had joined forces to smooth over the Renaults and obtain permission to bring forward the movie's release date. The Renault family, including Zero's father, had privately told these people that within a certain range, it would be enough to teach Zero a small lesson. Fair competition was fine, but not too much. If it went too far and hurt the Renault family's reputation, the other members of the Renault family would not sit idly by. Although the Renaults did not have the final say in Lijo, they were the most powerful family in Lijo. No one objected. The fact that they were still thriving after 500 years in the new era showed how united the Renaults were when it came to important matters. Those in the business and entertainment circles were all wily old foxes. They knew exactly how far to go. In an office in a building in Lijo's state capital, a few investors of King of Snipers were chatting happily. "We should let Zero know that the reason he was able to earn box office earnings so easily in the past was because we gave in to the Renault family name. Let's not make sarcastic remarks. We even helped him suppress those who are making sarcastic remarks. He should be more sensible and stop spouting everything and disregarding everyone's reputation. We should let him know that in a true competition, there is no harm without comparison. Other than selling buzz, and using the Renault's connections to mobilize equipment. What else was there for the lousy film Zero had invested in? Shit, you're the one sniping. Only by comparing the quality of the film can one know where the gap is. People like Zero are too much of an eyesore. He's stirring up a foul atmosphere in the industry. As the seniors of the entertainment circle, it's time for us to stand up for him. News of King of Snipers' early release date caused a huge wave in the Lijo entertainment circle. God of War had previously been revealed to be released in January. Did that mean that the two blockbusters were going to clash? However, the former had a guarantee of quality. Just look at the director, scriptwriter, actors, and production company. As for the latter, forget it. Everyone was well aware of it. After King of Snipers had announced its release date, Wireless Media hadn't released a release date for God of War. Many people guessed that Zero knew he couldn't compete and was trying to push back the release date. Looks like God of War won't be released in January, an editor of a media company said in private. Taking a step back is the right thing to do. Even if he is a Renault, he can't be stubborn. The rest of the Renaults probably can't stand this senior master. Sigh, one has to know when to take a step back. It's not good to be too stubborn. People in their 20s should be sensible. This senior master Zero has done too many bad things. Even the rest of the Renaults can't stand it anymore. What a powerful sniper. Zero must be hurt this time, right? I hope this senior master can learn his lesson. But given his personality, will he back down? Someone doubted. Normally, Zero acted like he was number one in the world and was used to being arrogant. Now that he had encountered an obstacle, would he be willing to retreat? Wireless Media Headquarters. Senior Master, should we get someone to change the script? His agent asked. No way. Filming is almost done. What's the point of changing it? Zero sneered. Beat me down? I won't back down. Ask Silverwing when they can complete the third movement. Seeing Zero's insistence, Zero's agent didn't dare say anything else. He contacted one of Duan Qianji's assistants. After Duan Qianji heard from her assistant, she asked Feng Zhao, can it be completed by January? Yes. That's good. After ending the conversation, Duan Qianji instructed, according to the original plan, the third movement will be released on January 1st. Tell Lijo that the third movement will be sent to them by the end of December. Zero's agent's face was ashen when he received the reply. He thought that Silverwing's hopes of not completing the third movement by the end of the month had been dashed, but he didn't dare lie. He relayed Duan Qianji's words to Zero. That's perfect. Set the release date for January 1st. Not a single step back. Zero crossed his legs and shook them vigorously. Get the production team to speed up. I want it completed by the end of December. Make an announcement now. Set the release date for God of War on January 1st. I'm going to fight it out with them. Winning or losing didn't matter. He didn't care about the box office. He just stood his ground. Chapter 52. The movie Zero had invested in was in the midst of intense production. Compared to the buzz generated by the movie itself, the soundtrack was not worth mentioning. Other than a small portion of people in the music circles who paid attention to it, no one paid attention to who had composed the soundtrack. Only a small number of music-related media outlets would mention something like, the soundtrack for God of War does not seem to have been composed by someone from Lijo. They speculated that it was a great master from some other continent. Beyond that, no one mentioned it. Wireless Media only said that they had found a collaborator for the soundtrack, but they did not specify who it was. While the entire Lijo entertainment industry was waiting for a good show, so were the Yinzhou entertainment media. Silverwing had already announced that the third movement of the 100-year period of destruction series would be released on January 1st at 8 a.m. The 100-year period of destruction series had been released on October 1st, year 531 of the new era. After the first movement, Divine Punishment, had been released, the second movement, Cocoon Breach, had been released on November 1st of the same year. As for the third movement, it would only be released 2 months later. With such a long production period, Silverwing had to be well-prepared and ambitious. If the second movement revealed Silverwing's ambition, then the third movement would be a test of its explosive potential. Everyone in the Yinzhou entertainment industry was waiting to see how explosive the combination of a virtual idol and epic music would be. Many people left messages on Silverwing's official website. Some were fans of epic music, some were fans of gossip, and some were fans of virtual idol Polarlight. The latter group preferred music videos over music. What they cared about was whether or not Polarlight would star in a film or video, and whether or not Polarlight merchandise would be released. Silverwing had people in charge of the message board and had specially added 2 people to handle the Polarlight message board. Their daily task was to manage this message area and select some targeted questions to reply to. But recently, Silverwing's Polarlight message board staff had discovered that the message board had gained some unusual voices. When are they coming out? Exams are coming up. Hurry up, hurry up. We still have to wait until January 1st? So late? Luckily, we can make it. The exams won't be over by then. Let's hope the third movement is even more explosive. Only then will there be motivation. Just by looking at these words, one could tell that they were all students. But if one listened to the audio, one would realize that many of the voices were very young. Some were clearly immature, while others were in the puberty stage. Middle school students? Why are they all middle school students? Did you hire a water army? The person in charge of Polarlight's message board asked the publicity and public relations team. Nope. Even if they hired the internet water army, they wouldn't hire so many high school students. The other side was also puzzled. Speaking of middle school students, they should be having their final exam in January, said another person who was in charge of the comments section. At the mention of exams, they remembered that in November of this year, there had been a report about how the second movement seemed to be very popular among middle school students. When the second movement, Cocoon Breach, was released, it coincided with midterm exams for most secondary schools in Yinzhou. People had to find something to motivate themselves, so this group of secondary school students chose music that had a strong beat or that was more powerful and energizing. Cocoon Breach was the song they chose the most. The emotional struggle in the second movement, Cocoon Breach, was something that they were still young and lacked professional appreciation skills. They could not feel much of it, but it did not stop them from getting excited when they heard the explosive melody. It was a process of psychological suggestion. To put it bluntly, it was a process similar to brainwashing. When listening to it, people would forget about their laziness and fatigue, and their spirits would be lifted. During the midterm exams, they had used the second movement to brainwash themselves. After the exams, they stopped paying attention to it. There were too many things that could attract their attention. Even without music, they still had games and other forms of entertainment. Now, the end of the semester was approaching. Looking at the schedule, the final exam was approaching. This was even more important than the midterm exams. If they did poorly, not only would they be scolded, they would not be able to spend the entire winter and New Year holidays happily. There would be no red packets, no rewards, and they would be forced to do questions. Internet restrictions. Who would be willing to do that? Clench their teeth and cram for a few days? There was no motivation to persevere. As exam time approached, some students wanted to pick a few more tunes to perk themselves up. They wanted to see if there was anything like Cocoon Breach, but unfortunately, there were too few that were to their liking. When they searched the news, they discovered that there was a follow-up to the 100-year period of destruction series, but no matter how long they waited, they still did not receive it. So they teamed up and rushed to Silverwing's official website to urge them. They could also listen to the second movement again, but if they listened to the same song every day for a long time, they would still get tired. The brainwashing effect would also be weakened. That way, they would not be able to achieve their goal of being motivated by listening to the song. So now, they were hoping that Silverwing would release the third movement soon. That way, they would have the brainwashing tune to deal with the final exam. This group of high school students had their sights set on the third movement. Recently, when they had nothing better to do, they would flood the message boards and urge them to sing. After Silverwing announced the release date, they would flood the message boards every day with a countdown. So when the people in charge of the message boards saw the countdown, they knew that the high school students had come again. The 2 administrators in charge of Polarlight's message boards thought that high school students were indeed a little silly. As newcomers, they could understand. Plus, the final exams were approaching, and the pressure was high. Finding some fun to vent was understandable. Let them be. But as the days passed, the two administrators realized that they had been too naive. This group of high school students grew in numbers, and as if they had made a pact, they would flood the message boards every day. As it turned out, they made it a daily mission to flood the countdown. At first, it was only a small number, but as more people joined in, it became frustrating. As the managers of the message board, they had to see the audience's reactions from the messages and answer some of the more important questions. But now, those questions were drowned out by this bunch of countdown timer, and they had to filter them. It was too troublesome. The two administrators thought it over and decided to put a stop to this demonic trend. Thus, the next day, those who came to flood the countdown noticed that there was an announcement in the message boards. To keep the message boards clean, the number of countdown comments will be limited each day. So even if many people came to flood the countdown, they would not appear on the message boards. The two administrators looked at the much cleaner message boards and felt much better. This should make it easier for them to check the questions from other listeners. But within 2 days, the two administrators realized that this group of high school students was indeed no longer flooding the countdown individually. They were doing it as a group. Chia number 1 High School, Grade 2, Class 7, reporting for duty. 9 days until the release of the third movement. Chia number 12 High School, Grade 3, Class 1, reporting for duty. Yinchi number 5 High School, Grade 2, reporting for duty. Gongsu number 3 High School, Grade 4, reporting for duty. Wait, I'm also from Yinchi City. Everyone from Yinchi number 5 High School. Have you seen anyone from number 6 High School? Yinchi number 6 High School, Grade 8, reporting for duty. Anyone from Yinchi number 6 High School, Grade 3, Class 2? Please bring me along. Everyone from Chia number 1 High School, Grade 2, Class 7. We are from Class 8. Some of the older listeners were amused. They teased them as if they were kids. Aren't you afraid of being banned by the administrators again? The students thought about it and realized that it made sense. There were so many high schools in Yinzhou, and each school had 6 grades. Each grade had about 10 classes, and some districts had even more classes. The administrators of the message boards did not specify the maximum number of comments. At this rate, there was a real possibility that they would be banned. Thus, after another 2 days, the messages on the message boards changed again. Yinchi number 6 High School, Grade 2, reporting for duty. 7 days until the release of the third movement. Chia number 12 High School, Grade 3, reporting for duty. Chia number 1 High School, Grade 2, reporting for duty. Hold on, it's Chia number 1 High School. Since when are you representing the second grades? Which class are you from? Grade 2, Class 1. What? You're not happy? I'm from Class 8. I'm not happy. Don't leave after school. See you at the gym. Wait, don't be a coward. The two administrators looked at the stream of messages on the message boards. At first, they were flabbergasted, but now they were stupefied. Are these high school students crazy? Do they have nothing better to do every day? You're so old, and you're still calling me your father? Did you finish the homework assigned by the teacher? Have you memorized? Have you finished your test questions? Have you decided on your life goals? The two administrators were distressed. Every day, they looked at the stream of messages on the message boards. They could not decide which one to ban. They banned this one, but not that one. There was anger on this side, anger on that side, and anger on that side. These high school students had bad tempers. If they were not careful, it would lead to an even fiercer scolding. If they complained about unfair treatment, they could have their wages docked. But some of the listeners who were watching the commotion treated these high school students' messages as a daily joke. An epic music lover over 100 years old even lamented, "It's good to be young." At first, there were only 5 or 6 high school students from large cities like Qian City, Yinchi City, and Gongshu City. But soon, the evil trend grew. Yandong, Yan'an, Yanbei, Jinggang, and even the remote Magu City had their high school students. Some of the students were just there to join in the fun. When their schoolmates saw groups from other grades, they followed suit. When students from the same city saw that groups from other schools had appeared, they could not ignore their own school, so they quickly joined in. Students from other cities saw this and did not want to be left behind. They followed suit, proving that there were high school students in their cities as well. 6 days to go. 5 days. 4 days. 3 days. Every day, the two administrators looked at the high school students on the message boards. Their only hope was that time would pass faster. When the third movement was released, the evil trend would die down. Finally, when the countdown reached 1 day, the two administrators breathed a sigh of relief and smiled at each other. Chapter 53. Year 532 of the New Era, January 1st. It was the first day of the new year. On the 50th floor of Silver Wing headquarters, Peng Pusong was a little nervous. He had no idea how well he was doing. During the recording of the third movement, Fang Zhao was even stricter than before. He had been practicing every day for the past month. Sometimes, it would take him a week or two to perfect a single line. He had never heard the final product. All he could do was wait for the music video to be released. It wasn't just Peng Pusong. The entire virtual idol department was nervous. After the release of the second movement in November, they had worked overtime for more than a month. The second movement would determine whether they could succeed. The third movement would determine how far they could go. After tasting the sweetness, they would put pressure on themselves without Fang Zhao having to say anything. When they were tired, they would relax in the game room and take a nap. When they woke up, they would rush back to work. Silver Wing had set up a backup technical team to lend them a hand if they couldn't do it. So they didn't have to worry about funding, manpower, or salary. All they had to do was follow Fang Zhao's instructions and complete them. They didn't know how the final product would turn out. The only thing they could do was trust Fang Zhao, the project leader. Zheng Huang had been woken up by his alarm. He didn't see Fang Zhao, so he asked Zhu Wan, "Where's Big Zhao?" In the office, Zhu Wan replied. Zheng Huang looked around the studio. "Nobody went home yesterday?" he asked when he saw everyone was there. "Nope. How could I sleep?" Zhu Wan yawned. After washing his face, he returned to the studio and sat down with the others, waiting for 8 o'clock. They didn't disturb Fang Zhao. They could tell that Fang Zhao was not in a good mood during the production of the third movement. Like an actor who was immersed in a scene, he needed time to disengage. A composer who was immersed in the music probably needed time to disengage. So all Zheng Huang and Zhu Wan could do was focus on what they were doing. They didn't want Fang Zhao to worry. Over at the newcomer department, Chu Guang had been calm about Polar Light being first in line when he saw the month's promotional schedule. In the last quarter of last year, he had been pushed down to 5th place on the New Pioneers chart. Fortunately, the third movement had not been released in December. Otherwise, he would not have been able to keep his 5th place. Now, after Divine Punishment and Cocoon Breach, the third movement, Mission, would be released on the public platform. He believed that the quality would not be bad. What puzzled Chu Guang, however, was that Neon Culture and Tongshan True Entertainment seemed to have no intention of continuing to compete with Polar Light. They were only pushing their two biggest stars, virtual idols Miyu and Andy Liu. Were they giving up on the competition for the rookies? In any case, it was a good thing for Chu Guang to have two less virtual idol competitors. On the top floor of Silver Wing Media, Duan Xinji and a few other Silver Wing executives were watching the music video for the third movement on the conference room's video and sound system. Among them, only Duan Xinji had heard the third movement and watched the finished music video. The others were watching it for the first time. Everyone at Silver Wing, whether they were singers, actors, technicians, or people in the logistics department, whether they were already at the office or on the way, was paying close attention to the 8 a.m. news. Alone in his office, Fang Zhao shut the curtains to block out the sunlight and turned on the sound system. At 8 a.m., when the platform updated, the music video for the third movement would be played. The third movement was different from the first two movements, which were restrained at first and then uplifted. From the start, the music video was backed up by an expanded orchestra, which gave it an epic feel. In the music video, this was a period of true conflict. The image inherited the darkness of the second movement. The opening scene was a bleak blue. The sky was overcast, and lightning flashed through the thick clouds. There were many figures running on the ground, and the rapid beating of the drums perfectly reflected the tense rhythm at the moment. Amidst the rapid beat of the drums, the familiar male voice led the chorus, blending symphonic and operatic techniques. Among them were some styles more acceptable to the people of the new era, displaying a kind of primitive wildness and aggressiveness. As the image progressed, the intensity of the battle between the two became even more apparent. Amidst the appalling danger, the surging momentum surged. A figure leaped high into the air like an eagle piercing through the clouds. The tree branches were twisted into distinct lines of muscles. With just a glance, one could feel the terrifying explosive power contained within. The descending figure kicked the side of the beast in front of him. His fist was like a polished boulder as it smashed down viciously on the beast's throat. Amidst the exploding drum beat and the strange electronic music, it was as if one could hear the crisp sound of bones breaking. This was not the sound of an instrument, but the sound of the image and music hinting to the human heart. In the image, mud splashed in all directions along with blood and water. Some splashed on the Trent's face and eyes. This made the people watching the image notice the Trent's eyes. They were a pair of murderous eyes, like a ferocious beast that had been startled awake from a deep slumber. The people watching this scene felt as if a pair of hands had plucked at the nerves in their brains. Even their bones trembled. They even suspected that the ones going berserk were the ferocious berserk beasts, or the Treants who were once at peace with the world. This change was not limited to the figure at the front. Beside him and behind him, there were many other figures with the same murderous aura. The variation of the expanded brass pipe made the melody played by the stringed instrument even more majestic and powerful. The violent and intense timpani represented an unyielding resistance. Compared to the appearance of the Treants in the first movement, one could see the difference in their bodies. From their appearance to their aura, they had undergone huge changes. This was a true adaptation to the battlefield, to the state they were in. They had chosen to become what they had been most unwilling to become in order to resist this cruel and absurd fate. Just as Yinzhou viewers of the 100-year period of destruction series expected, the third movement was a theme of struggle. The brass and woodwind variations with the characteristics of a march and the violent rhythm alternated, as if the two sides were confronting each other and fighting each other. It was tense and intense, no weaker than the momentum of the previous two movements. The majestic image brought about a huge visual impact, perfectly combined with the music, which was an impact that reached directly to the soul. Amidst the dark blue background, the transformed trees and the berserk beasts clashed fiercely. Even though it was just a virtual image, it gave people a realistic, three-dimensional feeling. It gave people a sense of the vicissitudes of time. The timidity of the transformed Treants had long since been worn away by the repeated battles of life and death. In order to find a peaceful place, they were willing to give it their all. From high mountains to grasslands, to basins, to hills, there was no paradise. Danger lurked everywhere. However, in the third movement, there was no longer the compromising and dejection of the second movement. From timidity to resistance, to numbness to war and death. Along the way, some people left and new companions joined. Finally, they found a relatively peaceful place, the polar regions. The polar regions were cold and covered in snow. Many viruses and mutated organisms could not adapt to the climate here. Therefore, in this sick world, this was the last pure land. There was no thick reddish-brown dust in the sky. Here, one could see the sun in the day, the stars that had not been seen in a long time, and the dreamlike, gorgeous aurora. Like a temporary calm after the hustle and bustle, the music became calmer. The gentle intertwining of the flute and the sound of the zither relaxed the tense minds of the listeners. This was a description of a peaceful life. In this polar region, the group of Treants had a chance to rest. They did not have to worry about wild beasts with long fangs that could jump out at any time. Some of the young Treants let out a relaxed smile. Although it was cold here, it was safer, right? A running young Treant smiled stiffly as it ran on the snow-covered ground. Just as it was about to slip, it was scooped up by a strong arm made of twigs and placed on a tall, broad shoulder. The scene and the melody were warm and intoxicating. Against such a backdrop, it seemed as if a stable and peaceful scene was about to unfold. However, the people watching the video understood that the polar regions probably corresponded to a part of the period of destruction described in real history. During the later stages of the period of destruction, there had been a polar summit. At that time, The 12 continents had not yet been divided. There had only been each war zone. Nearly 100 leaders and important leaders from each war zone had gathered in the polar regions to discuss an all-out war. This temporary period of peace was not the end. It was the foreshadowing of a final outbreak. The sound of the zither changed, like the contemplation of survivors after a violent storm. Although this place was not absolutely safe, compared to the areas they had passed through, it was indeed peaceful. However, this place was also not suitable for their growth. Most importantly, they were no longer satisfied with living in one place. In the new era, many books on the history of the period of destruction had records of the polar summit. No one knew who had said it, but it had been passed down. Why should we leave something that can end in our generation for the next generation? Since we have already come this far, what harm is there in fighting again? Our generation has all become participants in the struggle, martyrs. But at least we have experienced a short period of peace. Those who were born in the period of destruction have never seen a peaceful world. They were born in blood and fire, but they should not only belong to war. The records of the period of destruction in history books were embellished, but they weren't made up randomly. Fang Zhao remembered that someone had indeed said something similar. Perhaps he himself had said it too. Why should we no longer be able to live in the homeland that we once loved? Why should we give up the world? We are already very strong, aren't we? In the video, a group of tree people stood on a snow-covered ground, looking up at the sky. The polar lights embellished by the stars were like a burning, flowing fire. The percussion created layers of increasing intensity, as if to emphasize a certain kind of conviction. The figure standing in front of the group of trees did not have the ruthlessness and craziness of a berserk beast in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of reluctance and nostalgia in his calm eyes, as if he was bidding farewell to an old photograph. The polar lights in the sky gradually disappeared, and the sky began to brighten. The figure in front of them did not linger any longer. He turned and left. His spine, which supported his entire body, was already riddled with scars. He could collapse from his injuries at any moment. Other than himself, no one knew what kind of burden he had to bear. Many of the tree people in the group were in the same situation. However, as long as they were not too injured to walk or run, they all joined the group leaving. In the middle of the group of trees, some figures were playing with the young treants. When they saw the group leaving, they lifted the young treants from their bodies, carefully placed them on the ground, and turned to leave. One of the tree people gently placed a finger on the forehead of the young treant, preventing it from following them. Then, they got up and left, exchanging fist bumps with another tree person who was also leaving. They smiled wordlessly. They did not look back, because if they did, they might not have the courage to leave. The tiny treant, who remained in place, looked at the figures leaving in confusion. It did not seem to understand. Weren't they already safe? As long as they stayed here and didn't go out, it would be fine. The outside world was so dangerous. Why did everyone still want to leave? More and more figures walked out and joined the group leaving. Only the old and weak tree people who could not fight were left in the cold. Although the polar region was cold, it was the safest place at this time. The orchestral ensemble with the premonition of battle, coupled with specific electroacoustic instruments, once again created a tense atmosphere to match the chaotic and irrational fate. In that era that no one wanted to experience, cruel choices had to be made. Looking down from the sky, the densely packed figures formed an endless wriggling brown ash. Against the background of the white snow, they advanced in the opposite direction from the polar region. An intense horn sounded. With the powerful addition of the timpani, the sound intensity of the music also increased rapidly. With the low and powerful push of the bass and wind instruments, and the tight horn sound of 4 degrees up, the chorus advanced layer by layer with the music, like a team walking out of the polar region in the image. The greatly expanded brass pipe group showed the restrained madness and determination of this team. This team contained limitless power and hope, as if they were about to carve out a higher and further path. The chorus gradually intensified, and the image quickly crossed the polar region, over the mountains and hills. There seemed to be a whooshing sound that sounded like the cold winter wind blowing past his ears. A grayish-brown silhouette stomped on the ground forcefully, leaped and dashed forward, and arrived in front of a berserk beast at lightning speed. His strong arm, which was made of twigs, was like a sharpened axe. He struck towards the berserk beast's sternum with an unbridled ferocity. The 3 consecutive notes with a tendency were as violent as this extremely explosive blow, attacking one's eardrums one after another. Now that they had nothing to worry about, the grayish-brown figures became even more reckless and frenzied when they attacked. The broken branches and the scattered wood splinters mixed with the blood of the berserk beasts. Gusts of fierce wind blew past the brown and reddish-brown figures that were fighting each other, bringing up countless pieces of mud mixed with wood shavings and hare's blood on the ground. It was as if one could smell the fresh and rich smell of blood and wood shavings in the air even through the projection. The continuous roar of the timpani, the violent dissonance, the use of irregular accents, and the complex musical orchestration fused classical symphonies, New Age music, hymns, elegies, military marching music, electronic music, and many other styles. The momentum was like a volcano that had been dormant for millions of years suddenly erupting. The sound waves seemed like they were about to set off a tsunami that could drown the world. The theme color of the image had gradually changed from an oppressive blue to a brilliant yellow, like the color of the sun piercing through the clouds, or more like the color of a burning flame. The overall brightness of the image was twice as bright as before the first movement. Furthermore, the brightness was still increasing. When would a tree emit such a bright light? When it burned. The image came to an end with this soul-stirring symphony. MV main character, Polar Light Species, Longxiang Tianluosong title, 100-year period of destruction, third movement, mission producer, Fang Zhao production team, Polar Light project team, Fang Zhao, Zhu Wan, Song Miao, Peng Pusong, Zheng Huang, Wan Yu, Fu Yingtian, Stiller, Zhang Yu, etc. Production company, Silver Wing Media. Fang Zhao turned off all the video and audio equipment and drew the curtains. He did not look at the online reviews or the download count. Instead, he stood in front of the French window on the 50th floor and gazed out. He recalled a conversation he had with a few old friends. What is mission? Who knows? It's just that as we fought, I suddenly felt that this was the way to go. Without experiencing it, no one knew what they would become. People could become what they loathed, or they could become what they adored. In that century of struggle against the heavens and fate, at first, it was for survival. But later, for various reasons, even though they knew that they might not be able to see the golden age that they were looking forward to, many people still volunteered to participate in the war that burned with their lives. People were the true miracles of that dark period. Fang Zhao himself had participated in the Polar Summit Conference, but he had ultimately died in a battle at the end of the all-out war. He had died at the end of the third movement, at the Qian War Zone during the period of destruction. In other words, Qian City, the heart of Yenzhou, one of the 12 continents of the new era. Goodbye, old friends. At the same time, in Lizhou, which was 3 hours apart from Yenzhou. 8 in the morning in Yenzhou was the equivalent of 11 in the afternoon in Lizhou. Today was the first day of the new year, and it was also the day of the highly anticipated dual-topic movie battle in Lizhou's entertainment circle. However, wireless media had said that their film, God of War, would be screened on January 1st at 11 sharp. This made many people curious. They rarely saw such a situation where the movie was screened at noon. Some people even guessed that this was a form of compromise. However, to match the timing, King of Snipers had also been pushed back to 11 sharp. Zero's agent had been busy creating buzz for the past few days. He did not have high hopes for God of War, but in order to recoup his losses, he had worked with his team to create buzz. The more people watching, the more they could recoup their losses. Chapter 54. After the third movement was completed, Silver Wing sent it to Zero to listen to. Zero was very satisfied with the score and was very pleased with his wise decision. However, it was, after all, going to be used as a soundtrack for a certain plot in God of War. The plot of a movie was different from a music video. There were many factors to consider. If the requirements were not high, he could have just used it. But this time, Zero felt the pressure, so he took it more seriously. After negotiating with Silver Wing, He paid a sum of money to get the composer over at Silver Wing to make slight adjustments to the score to better integrate it into the movie. It wasn't that Wireless Media couldn't find a good composer, but Zero felt that the original composer should be able to do a better job. At Silver Wing's side, Feng Zhao had done the adjustments himself. After watching a clip of God of War that Duan Qianji had given him, he had rearranged the third movement. In the grand scenes of a movie, there were many sound elements. It wasn't just the sound of the score, but also the sound effects of the movie itself. If the score and sound effects were not arranged properly, they could easily interfere with each other or even mask each other. Therefore, when Feng Zhao rearranged the third movement, he had incorporated sound effects similar to those seen in the movie clips into the music. He had made adjustments to the timbre, pitch, and rhythm of the score. This was the most common way of handling a soundtrack. Adding in electronic music could also make the music and sound effects in the movie more natural. However, compared to the movie itself, the score used as the soundtrack did not attract much attention from Wireless Media. Zero only felt that the score was very suitable for his flashy entrance. As for Zero's agent, he did not care about the soundtrack. In his opinion, it was just a soundtrack. It sounded good, but it was not enough to affect the movie. When it was nearing 11 o'clock, Wireless Media's people were staring at the statistics to see how many people had bought tickets for the opening screening. Nowadays, due to technological advancements and rapid improvements in video equipment, the number of physical theaters had decreased significantly. Other than a few iconic theaters used for commercial events in every city, most people watched movies online. Physical theaters had already become a kind of virtual network. In the various cities of Lizhou, many people had already prepared their viewing equipment and were waiting. Of course, most of them were here for the resounding reputation of Zero, the Renault family's hedonistic young master. Some were purely here to watch and write their evaluations, acting as the vanguard for testing the poison. Zero watched the premiere at home. He even specially invited a few of his close friends to watch the premiere in a luxurious theater room. It's starting. It's starting. Haha. Let me show you how I save the world. Zero didn't look at the sales figures online. Although he was a spoiled brat, he wasn't stupid. He knew that the quality of the film produced by his company couldn't compare to King of Snipers. However, he had already fought and didn't back down. He had already achieved his goal. As for the box office and reviews of God of War, whether or not he could recoup his losses were all secondary. Why didn't they have high hopes for God of War? Just by looking at the trailer, one could guess the plot. Anyway, it was the same old plot of the hero saving the damsel in distress and the world. It fully inherited the style of the first 7 movies that Zero had invested in. Just as the netizens had said, one of the movies that Zero had invested in was enough. The others were old wine in a new bottle. The plot of God of War was very simple. The male lead was an outstanding soldier, while the female lead was a reporter. When a big city was attacked by a monster, the female lead went to the disaster area to report. At the critical moment, the male lead led a team to save the city. In the end, the monster was defeated and the female lead returned with the happy ending. You couldn't be too serious when watching a movie. Once you were serious, you would discover many logical inconsistencies. However, compared to the previous 7 films, Zero had invested in the 8th film. Perhaps it was because he was also participating in the film, the actors, and even the extras acted very seriously. Even the actress that Zero wanted to promote as the female lead did not make any big mistakes. Even Zero himself did not have to say that his acting was absolutely good, but at least his acting was not as exaggerated as he had been in the previous 7 films. In this aspect, it was indeed a huge improvement. However, some sharp-eyed viewers could tell at a glance that Zero was a body double from a seemingly identical figure. A body double was used here, a body double was used here, and a body double was used here. Oh, it seemed that aside from the part that showed the face, the other parts, including the silhouette and the back, were all done by the body double. Bad review. Not professional. Another large number of negative reviews. Halfway through the movie, the disaster area was attacked by monsters. Smoke rose up like a black cloud, and the people gathered around it looked incredibly insignificant. When the flames from the explosions landed on their bodies, they felt as if they were about to burn their bones. The The smoke that spread out with sparks seemed to be sucked into their lungs with every breath they took, and their organs felt as if they were being cooked. Everything looked so real in the hologram. At that moment, two words popped up in the minds of the viewers who saw this scene: bad film. It was a standard commercial movie with powerful special effects and a cliched plot. It was the standard of an old-fashioned commercial movie. You only needed to peek at a corner to know what the movie was like. And in the new era, where movies and television were rampant, this sort of old-fashioned commercial movie that lacked any novelty or logic was also classified as a bad film. When many people saw this scene, they understood. Just as they had expected, every part of the plot was about the same as they had predicted. Very good. Next, it was time for the main character, played by young Master Zero, to lead the team to save the beauty and the world. This was also the climax of the movie. Many people had been enduring their sleepiness and waiting for this moment. They had treated this movie as a joke. Now, they were finally going to see the punchline. The movie Zero had invested in was melodramatic and illogical, but at least the scenes were grand and shocking. This was still tolerable. Soon. In a bit, I'll show you how cool this young master's entrance is. Zero lay on the sofa, excitedly shaking his feet as he reminded the others to pay attention to the next part of the plot. At the same time, outside Zero's house, a flying transport slowly descended. The area was a single-family house with a large garden and a landing spot for flying cars and flying transports. When Zero's housekeeper saw the flying transport land, he didn't care about the food and wine he had prepared for the viewing room. He placed them on the table and called the other servants in the house to greet the flying transport. He didn't go over to greet the flying transport. Instead, he waited respectfully at the side. His hair was messed up, but he didn't raise his hand to fix it. He just stood there like a robot. When the airflow calmed and the cabin door opened, the housekeeper and the servants bowed even lower. They hung their heads, not daring to look up. Out of the corner of their eyes, they could only see the boots of a few security guards. An old man with a head full of white hair walked out of the flying transport. The personal doctor beside him wanted to help him, but was stopped by a raised hand. The old man looked at the house in front of him with a faint and amiable smile on his face. He sighed and said, "It seems like I haven't been here for 10 years. He then turned to the butler who was waiting respectfully at the side. "Is Zero at home?" "Young master is. He is currently watching a movie with 7 of his friends in the viewing room," the housekeeper replied respectfully. The volume of his voice was just right. It wasn't too loud and ear-piercing, but it wasn't so soft that it couldn't be heard clearly. However, there was a slight tremor in his voice. He was nervous. "It's good that he's here." The old man walked forward. The housekeeper took large strides over and opened the door. After the old man entered the house, he raised his head slightly and looked into the house with a worried expression. He wasn't worried that Zero would be scolded. He was worried that Zero would anger the old man. This was the person with the highest status in the Renault family. Even the current Lijo governor had to respectfully receive his scolding. Who asked this old man to be the governor's biological father? Chapter 55. As the person with the highest seniority in the Renault family, although the old man had already retired, he still retained his honorary title and treatment of a general. It was just that he no longer held any position. When people saw him, they would still respectfully call him Old General Renault. When one was old, their mobility was greatly reduced. Recently, when Old General Renault was idle, he tended to overthink. He thought about his children and grandchildren, his late wife, and his old comrades. This wasn't a good sign, so the doctor suggested that the old man go out for a walk and relax. Otherwise, staying in the house all the time would make it easy for him to overthink. Overthinking at this age wasn't necessarily a good thing. As for where to go, Old General Renault thought about his family and decided to visit this great-grandson who had caused so much trouble for the family. When the other Renaults mentioned Zero, they would only say that this little fellow was very lively. This was tactful. He had also understood the truth. However, what satisfied him was that although this little great-grandson was a little hedonistic and liked to cause trouble, he had not done anything outrageous. He could only turn a blind eye and pretend he didn't know anything. A while ago, Old General Renault had surfed the internet on a whim. He had discovered that Zero was mentioned quite a bit in the news. It just so happened that he decided to go out for a walk today. So he decided to visit Zero. The doctor was a little worried. He only hoped that Zero wouldn't anger the old man too much. Originally, he had only planned to pick 5 people from the exclusive medical team to bring along, but after some thought, he had picked 2 more to be a little safer. The old man was really something. Of all the people he could see, he had to run over to see this Zero who couldn't wait to create some big news every day. After the butler pointed out the place, the old man refused to call Zero out to greet him. Instead, he walked over to see what this troublemaking little great-grandson of his was up to. He wanted to know the real side of these youngsters. The door to the viewing room wasn't locked. Someone had probably gone to the bathroom earlier, and the door wasn't completely closed after they went in. The voices of the men and women in the viewing room mixed with the sound of the movie's sound effects and drifted out from the crack of the door. The butler, who was following behind, kept his head down. His hands were clenched tightly, and large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. He kept praying in his heart, "Young master, please, please, please keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything outrageous. Even if you're just bragging, you have to have a limit. It's best not to brag now." The old man did not walk in. Instead, he stood outside the door, holding his cane in one hand and resting his other hand on top of it. Even though his stature was slightly hunched due to his age, he still gave off the feeling of a boulder firmly planted on the ground, unshakable by the wind. The personal doctor had been paying attention to the old man's expression. He knew very well what this group of playboys usually looked like. So now he was worried that the old man would be in trouble. More than a dozen people stood outside the viewing room without making a sound. The whole room was in a tense state. The servants responsible for cleaning were trembling with fear, and every movement was careful. Because of this, the commotion in the viewing room could be heard clearly from the outside. Inside, Zero had no idea what was going on and was bragging about how he felt when he was acting. "It's not that I'm bragging, but when I was acting, I felt that it was similar to my great-grandfather's style." How was it? Wasn't it very similar? Just that aura alone. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to act it. Zero was still bragging, and the others echoed him. However, in their hearts, they were thinking that the scene of him jumping onto the aircraft just now was obviously a fucking stunt double. In the movie, a large number of troops were heading to the disaster area. The movies that Zero had invested in might not be logical in other aspects, but he did not want to be sloppy when it came to military equipment. Many of them even used real goods. Of course, only a small portion of them were real goods. The rest were all done with computer special effects. If they really used as many real goods as in the movie, it would be considered a large-scale military operation and not a movie. In the movie, with all kinds of aircraft, fighter jets, land, and air forces dispatched, the timpani gradually became louder, and the dull sound of a horn that seemed to shake the earth suddenly rang out. Many people who were absent-mindedly watching the movie were shocked, and their lazy nerves suddenly became excited as if they had suddenly received an electric shock. Amidst the cacophony created by the various aircraft, the majestic atmosphere created by the orchestral music, and the variations of the marching brass and woodwind violently alternated. It was just like the fierce battle between the good and the evil in the movie. The visual shock brought by the extremely realistic images perfectly combined with the music was an impact that reached straight to the soul. Haha, how is it? Doesn't this team have the aura of a god of war? Right, look, it's right here. I'm going out the hatch. Everyone in the viewing room immediately sat up straight and looked seriously at the image on the screen. They saw the door of the transport aircraft open, and the cargo hold loaded with fully armed soldiers descended along ropes. Among them was the main character played by Zero. Before he jumped off, there was a close-up shot to let the audience know that this was the main character and that Zero was acting. Then, the goggles on his helmet blocked the view. And then, there was no then. Young Master Zero only showed his side profile 45 degrees before he exited the aircraft. The cool action of sliding down the rope from the aircraft had been done by the stunt double. However, no matter how the audience in the viewing room cursed inwardly, they still praised Zero with all their might. They wished they could praise Zero to the heavens. Outside the door, The accompanying doctor's face twitched when he heard the flattery. He didn't need to look to know what was going on. Oh, right. The movie this young master acted in was called God of War? TSK. How big of a face did he have? God of War? How could those troops in the movie compare to the real God of War troops? The real God of War was right beside them. The butler following behind lowered his head even more, as though he was studying the ground to see if there was a crack that someone could crawl into to avoid disaster. The personal doctor took a quick look at the expression on the old master's face. The smile on the old master's face had disappeared, but he didn't seem angry. Instead, he seemed to have thought of something, and his attention wasn't on the young master's inside. The old master's attention was indeed not on Zero and the others, but on the sounds coming from outside. Although he was old, he wasn't deaf. He didn't need to look at the image. Just by listening to the sounds, he could distinguish the model of the transport aircraft, fighter jets, and bombers. He could also distinguish the model of the guns and cannons. He could also tell which tank's armor was producing the sounds, and which type of grenade had exploded. Although he had left the battlefield for so many years, he had always paid attention to military matters. He had always thought that he would forget things, but now that he recalled them, they were so clear. Beside the old master, the senior doctor's antenna began to emit a strong alarm. General? The doctor realized that something was wrong with the old master. Veins were popping out on the back of the hand that was gripping the cane. His aged face was trembling slightly, as though he was enduring some immense pain. General? What's wrong? The doctor became even more anxious. At his age, his mental state hadn't been good recently. Even he didn't know, and didn't dare to imagine, what kind of unforeseen event would result from such a change. Old General Renault, who was standing there, didn't make a sound. It was as though he hadn't heard the doctor's words. He continued to stare blankly at a certain spot in the air, as though he was seriously listening to something or recalling something. His eyes were red and moist. The moment the background music started playing, he closed his eyes. Tears actually rolled down his cheeks, and they didn't show any signs of stopping. It was as though he couldn't control them, and his entire body began to tremble. The doctor was stunned. Ever since he had taken over the position from his father, he had never seen the old master so emotional. Fuck. Something big had happened. Medical team, come over immediately. Only he, the personal doctor, had come over. The rest of the medical team remained in the aircraft, on standby. The moment the medical team received the order, they immediately rushed into the room. The commotion outside was too loud, and the door wasn't completely closed. It was impossible for the people in the projection room to not notice. Zero had a bad premonition in his heart. He walked over and opened the half-closed door. When he saw the scene in front of the door, it was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. His legs went soft, and he knelt in front of the door of the viewing room. Chapter 56. At Wireless Media Headquarters. After the premiere of God of War, Zero's agent and a few of Wireless Media's top executives went to check the ratings on the authoritative film rating website. 5.5. Seeing this comment, the few of them took a deep breath at the same time, afraid that they had seen wrongly. Looking at the reviewers again, there were already more than 300 people who had given their comments. Looking at the IDs of those reviewers, there was no mistaking that some of them were famous movie critics who had always been upright and outspoken. Looking at the overall rating, there were 5 shining stars. They counted them one by one. That's right, 5 stars. A total of 5 stars. It was unbelievable. That kind of shitty plot could actually get such a high score. 5 was not the full score. The full score was 10. 5 was only half of the total score. But how many stars a film was given, whether it was good or bad, was based on the film itself. For example, a film like God of War, which the public thought was bad before its release, should be worth around 3 stars. This was also the average score of the previous 7 films Zero had invested in, although it was far from the 8.64 King of Snipers. Compared to the previous 7 films produced by Wireless Media, it was an unbelievably high score. That's right, in the eyes of Zero's team, 5 stars was indeed high. This was also the highest rating Zero had ever received from a professional since he had invested in a movie. screenshots, photos. These were all evidence. Zero's agent was afraid that the system had malfunctioned and had given a high score. It was not that he did not trust the review system, but this score was unexpectedly high for them. It was not just Zero's agent and Wireless Media's team. Those who did not watch the premiere online were also astonished by this rating. Accounts were registered using their real names and were bound to their personal terminals. It was not possible for a large number of fake reviewers. If it was too obvious, they could apply for an investigation. So, what was up with such a high score? Am I fucking seeing things? God of War's current overall rating is 5 points. There must be some shameful deal going on here. It's already 5-1, and it's still rising. How do you feel about the premiere's poison test? Who's going to say the truth? I just finished watching the premiere. How do I put it? It was so satisfying. The plot was so cliché, but it was so satisfying. Especially when the battle started at the end. It was so shocking. I give it 5.5 stars. Actually, young Master Zero's films have plenty of action scenes, but this time, it left a particularly deep impression. I think it must have something to do with the soundtrack. I give it 5 stars. Originally, I only wanted to give it 3 stars, but when I thought of the soundtrack, I added 2 more stars. Among the speakers, there were also professional commentators who were rather well known in Lai Zhou. I give it 5.5 stars. 1 star for the plot. I don't need to say more. Everyone who has read it will understand. The production was 2.5 stars. Compared to the previous 7 films, there was indeed an improvement, especially in terms of the actors' acting skills. It wasn't very good, but they were quite serious. I only gave the previous 7 films 2 stars, but this time, seeing that there was an improvement, I was willing to give it half a star. If it had been based on previous ratings, I would have given it 3.5 stars, which would have been similar to Zero's previous films. However, the reason why I gave it an additional 2 stars is because of the soundtrack. I believe this is also the reason why everyone in the industry gave me 2 more stars. Indeed. Another professional commentator also chimed in. A movie soundtrack is an integral part of a movie's soul. A movie without music is like an empty shell. Music has the ability to propel a narrative, exaggerate emotions, and form. A good soundtrack can add color to a movie. Everyone can look at those classic award-winning movies in the past. Many of them may be vague about the characters and plot, but they still remember the music in them. Some of them have even become masterpieces that have been passed down for a long time. And the soundtrack for God of War at the climax 2/3 of the way through is indeed breathtaking. When I was in university, I majored in film soundtrack, so from a professional point of view, I can't find any flaws. That soundtrack conveys the joy and sorrow of war, the blood and glory, the grandeur and carnage of war. However, I don't know which great master composed that soundtrack. Those in the industry who know the inside story can reveal a little in private. Waiting online. Because of the regional barriers and the Lijo entertainment industry's ban on foreign music, most people in Lijo did not know much about the 100-year period of destruction series. Even though the second movement had caused a stir, the news had been edited, so some people had not even heard of the virtual idol Polar Light. The premiere was also when the third movement was released in Yenzhou. Even though there were a few people who paid attention to the release of Polar Light's third movement in Yenzhou, those who listened to the song had not gone to watch the movie, and those who watched the movie had not gone to listen to the song. Thus, for a while, no one had revealed the source of the soundtrack or its composer. However, there were also people who felt that this sort of copyrighted music was specially created for film and would not appear anywhere else. The only way to listen to it was to watch the movie God of War. Indeed, some people who were interested in the soundtrack went to watch God of War a second time. There were also quite a few people who chose to watch God of War after seeing the reviews online. Thus, during the second screening, Zero's agent and team discovered that the number of people watching the second screening was even higher than the premiere. This had not happened in the previous 7 series. Good news. This is great news. Zero's agent wanted to tell Zero the good news, but who knew that he could not get in touch with Zero? Since he could not get in touch with Zero, he tried contacting the people who hung out with Zero. In the end, he could not get in touch with any of them. Could it be that something had happened? Zero's agent imagined all sorts of kidnappings, extortion, and hostage killing. He almost called the police, but when he remembered that it was the Renault family, he contacted one of Zero's uncles. He was told that Zero and a few others were at home and that he did not need to worry. But Zero's agent sensed that something was amiss. Could it be that something had really happened? At the same time, at Zero's place, the few young people who were on good terms with Zero were all quietly waiting in the screening room. All their communication devices had been confiscated, and they could not leave the room. Even when they went to the toilet, there was someone following them. They did not dare to barge in, not to mention that it was the Renault family who had stopped them. Just the two armed guards guarding the door were enough to make them not dare to make a sound. Those were real guns, and these guards would not give them preferential treatment based on who they were or whose children they were. They only gave them cold looks, making them so afraid that they wanted to cry, but they did not dare to make a sound. They did not know what had happened, and at that time, no one dared to go out. They only saw Zero kneeling at the door after opening the door, without a trace of his usual insolence. By the time they wanted to look out, the guards had already pointed their guns at them and forced them back. And those who were more quick-witted had already guessed in their hearts. There were indeed quite a few people in the Renault family who were capable of bringing such a squad with them. However, the person who could scare Zero to such an extent and make the entire house tense up was most likely old General Renault of the Renault family, who no longer appeared in front of others. But why would that old general come here? To see Zero? But based on the current situation, and looking at the armed guards at the door, he thought of a possibility. Something had happened to old General Renault's health. The health of a person of this level was related to the overall situation. Before the Renault family made preparations, they would not let the truth leak out. That was why they had confiscated their communication devices. Regardless of whether they had seen anything or not, they would first be confined here. But why would old General Renault's health suddenly have a problem? Seeing how Zero had been kneeling there, could it be that Zero had angered the old general? Thinking of this possibility, that person's body trembled, and he could only light a candle for Zero. If Zero angered the old general, even the governor, who had always doted on his grandson, would not let Zero off. At that moment, Zero was indeed not in a good state. He was still kneeling, but at the door of another room. He did not know what was going on inside, but thinking of how he had seen his great-grandfather just now, it might be not good. 5 members of the Renault family had already entered the room. They were all Zero's uncles and aunts. His grandparents' generation held important positions and could not immediately drop what they were doing and rush over. Zero's father had also rushed over. After confirming that the old master's life was not in danger, he gave Zero a vicious beating. In the past, if Zero's father had beaten him like this, the others would have stopped him. But this time, no one said anything. Zero's mother just sat at the side, anxious. She opened her mouth several times, but was stopped by his aunt. They did not know the cause of this incident, but they were certain that the old master was agitated because of Zero. Connecting this with the things that Zero had done in the past, they came to a conclusion. It was definitely Zero's fault. With a bruised face, Zero knelt on the floor and cried, but he did not dare to make a sound. His usual arrogance had long disappeared. He was a silk pants, but he was not heartless. He did not wish to see such a situation. He did not even know why his great-grandfather was so angry. Could it be because of what he had said in the viewing room? If he had known that the old master was standing outside, he would not have dared even if he was beaten to death. As he was crying, the door opened. Zero's father had a cold expression on his face. "The old master has something to ask you," Zero sniffled. Holding onto the door frame, he wanted to get up, but after some thought, he knelt back down and inched into the room. The old master's back was facing the door, so Zero could not see the old master's expression. He only felt his heart tremble under the pressuring gazes of the elders. "Great-grandfather," Zero said softly. Zero was already prepared to be scolded when he suddenly heard a question. "What was the song called?" the old master asked. "Ah." Zero was dumbfounded. The others in the room also looked over in bewilderment. "What ah?" "Hurry up and say it." Zero's father was enraged by his stupid son's behavior. He clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. "Oh." Zero shrunk his neck and hurriedly recalled. At that time, It should have been the part he had acted in. What was the title of the song? It was called Mission. Mission. That song was called Mission, Zero said. Chapter 57. Perhaps when some people heard the third movement, they felt that it was cool and pleasing to listen to. Just like when Zero first heard it, he felt that it was impressive enough to hold up the scene and fit his style. But to old General Renault, beneath the passion was a solemn and stirring feeling. Someone once said, "Music only provides the atmosphere. Every listener is listening to their own story." These words were appropriate for old General Renault. Regardless of what the composer had in mind when composing this movement, when old General Renault heard it, he was reminded of his own past experiences. Once, when old General Renault was still young, he had participated in many battles. However, most people did not know about those battles because they had taken place on a foreign planet. The 100-year period of destruction had already depleted a lot of resources on this planet. The development of the new era required large amounts of resources and energy. If they were to take more from this planet could only wither away and even welcome the end of the world. Because the development of the human world was far faster than the planet's self-healing ability, they needed to explore the outside world in search of more resources and energy. There was no good or evil, only a standpoint. There were some things that had to be done. The glorious development of the new era had come at a heavy price. It was just that few people knew about it. How many people had lost their lives in the infinite space, lost their lives on foreign planets, and not even their bones remained? Recently, he would often think about his comrades who had traveled with him to foreign planets. If they had not died and lived to this day, their statuses would not be lower than his. When he heard the familiar gunshots and mechanical sounds in the movies, his brain had already begun to involuntarily correspond to the fragments in his memory. The music guided his thoughts to a tragic scene that he had never wanted to recall. People always loved to sing the praises of heroes, and there was no lack of superhuman heroes in movies and television. However, he rarely watched those because he knew that no matter how those heroes, endowed with divine power, performed on screen, in reality, those heroes would still be injured and would die. He had read too many books and movies about heroes and listened to too many songs that praised them, but most of them had problems. He talked about war, but did not dare to face up to the cruelty and irrationality of war, and did not explore the meaning of war. He talked about man, but ignored the philosophical consideration of man's fate, soul, and value. He did not talk about the rise of life force, the magnificent process of glory and destruction in war. He exaggerated the hero too much and separated him from the ordinary people. Whether it was soldiers or the heroes portrayed in movies, they were all a part of human life. To deny and reject the other side of the light, to ignore the sad faces of those who lost their loved ones after every victory, in the eyes of this old man, it was not real art. Of course, it could also be that he was old and could not keep up with the level of appreciation of the times. Young people might prefer the kind of beauty without sorrow and worry. Perhaps only those who had been on the battlefield would know how much life was burned under that kind of impassioned melody. Taking a deep breath and letting out another long sigh, the old man said, "You found this piece of music very well." Zero, who was kneeling on the ground, tried his best to open his swollen eyes. He almost doubted his own hearing. Was the old master praising him? Zero was flabbergasted that the old man was actually interested in a piece of background music. At this moment, he realized that the reason the old man was so agitated was probably because he had heard the background music. If that was the case, he had not angered the old master to the point of tears, but the old master had cried while listening to the song. He had been beaten up for nothing? Zero, who was kneeling on the ground, looked at his father. Cough. Looking at Zero's face, which had been beaten beyond recognition, Zero's father coughed lightly and turned his head to look at the wall of the room. The other elders in the room were the same. They all felt a little awkward. How could they have imagined that the old master would be in such a state after listening to a song? They had almost beaten Zero up, but luckily, they had controlled themselves when they heard that the old master's life was not in danger. Otherwise, they would have been even more embarrassed. "Who is the composer of Mission?" the old master asked. I don't know. Zero could feel the stares of the elders poking holes in him after his answer. He could only bite the bullet and continue. I really don't know. The composer is from Yinzhou, Silverwing Media. They did not tell me who the composer was, but the composer had 2 movements before mission. Great-grandpa, let me find them for you. Towards the end, Zero let out a loud hiss. Zero's father twitched his finger. He knew what kind of shit this kid was about to shit. Sure enough, after hearing Zero's hiss, the old master turned his chair around and saw Zero, who had been beaten black and blue. He asked in surprise, "What happened to you? Get up. Why are you kneeling on the ground?" He had been too immersed in his memories and had not paid attention to his surroundings. Now he had regained his senses. Zero staggered to his feet, rubbing his knees. My dad hit me. It hurts. At his age, what could old General Renault not guess? He just laughed. You deserve it. Didn't you say you had the winds of the war god? You're far from it. Old General Renault's eyesight could tell that Zero had only been beaten up a little. His bones and internal organs had not been hurt. It was just a superficial wound. A lesson would be enough to prevent this mischievous kid from causing trouble outside. Zero gave a fawning smile. This sort of coquettish and fawning behavior was the favorite of the older generation. Back then, Lijiao's governor had been treated this way. Zero's father wanted to roll his eyes. This little brat should learn something good instead of doing it the wrong way. However, Zero knew his limits when it came to wooing the older generation. He did not want to appear overly fawning, as that would easily arouse disgust. Thus, he quickly restrained himself. Great-grandpa, do you want to listen? I'll bring the other 2 movements and the complete version of mission. Zero looked at the old master's personal doctor. He did not want the old master to lose his composure again. If something really happened, there would be no way to regret it. No problem, the doctor said with a smile. It was good to have a good cry after holding it in for too long. It was a good thing to vent all the lingering depression in one's heart. The old master usually liked to put up a strong front and kept all the bad things to himself. After so many years, he had suffered a lot mentally. Crying a little was a form of mental relaxation. But this time, he broke out in a cold sweat. Anyone who had seen the old master cry like that would not be able to keep their cool. Zero, who had gotten permission, ran out happily with a face that looked like a pig's head. Zero's mother thought the kid had been beaten to the point of insanity. It's good to be lively, the old master said with a smile after Zero left. These words were for the few people in the room, as well as for Zero's father. What could Zero's father say? All he could do was force a smile and reply. That kid had already been raised to this extent. How much could he be expected to change? As long as he did not do anything outrageous, they would not be too strict with him. Soon, Zero brought the complete versions of Divine Punishment, Cocoon Breach, and the original mission that Silver Wing had given him to the old master. It'll be better if you watch it with the music video. I'll adjust the equipment for you. Zero said he was going to adjust it himself, but he was actually instructing the guards and servants to do it. After the 3 music videos were played, although the old master did not seem as agitated as before, his eyes were red again. What an outstanding piece of art! The few people in the room were surprised that the old master had given such a high evaluation. Zero's father blurted out, "Why can't it be from Lijiao?" Regardless of the continent, anyone who can produce such music is worthy of respect, the old master said. It was precisely because of the emotional content that music could carry and sublimate that it could transcend time and politics. After listening to the songs and watching the music video, Zero was chased out by his father. The door closed, and the people inside went to discuss important matters. After Zero came out, he did not bother to look at his friends, who were trembling under the cold gaze of the guards. Instead, he called his agent. Zero's agent received the good news that God of War had received a high score. Before he could ask what had happened and why he had not been able to reach Zero, he heard Zero say anxiously, "I don't fucking want to know that right now. Contact Silver Wing. I don't care how much it costs, by the rights to the movement of mission. Remember, I want the full rights." Zero's agent was taken aback by these words. Although the music was good and would add points to the film, there was no need to spend so much money on it, right? He wanted to ask what had happened with the Renault family, but Zero had already hung up, so he could only give up. While Zero's agent was discussing the purchase of the rights with Silver Wing, Duan Shinji received a call at Silver Wing headquarters. "Honey," a rough voice came over the communicator. Duan Shinji wanted to hang up immediately, because every time her husband used this tone to call her, he must have a request that would put her in a difficult position. "Your company's new mission movement, you must keep it for me. Don't sell it." "What? I thought you weren't interested in music?" Duan Shinji asked. Chapter 58. Of course, Duan Shinji's husband, Major General Hong Lu, was a musical idiot. He could not tell what the song was about, but people in the military district could. They had their eyes on the song, and once they saw that it was a Silver Wing product, they went to Hong Lu to ask for it. Good stuff had to be kept for their own people. Although they would lose a lot of commercial profits, since Hong Lu had specifically asked for it, Duan Shinji chose to keep the third movement in Yinzhou. The fact that it had caught the attention of Yinzhou's military and even been used as the theme song for the promotional video showed that the series was well received. Perhaps the general public might not like it, but it was a good thing that the military liked it. Every year, Silver Wing had to borrow equipment and locations from the military. This time, it was rare for the military to ask for something. She thought it would be nice to do them a favor. That way, the next time they borrowed from the military, they would not be criticized. After ending the call, Duan Shinji asked her assistant, "Any news from Fiery Bird?" Online voting has started in Huangzhou. The voting in Yinzhou might start after Memorial Day. The online voting for Fiery Bird's spokesperson had been initiated by Rising Dragon, a well-known Huangzhou gaming media company. It had nothing to do with Fiery Bird, but it had garnered worldwide attention. Since it was a Huangzhou media company, the voting would start in Huangzhou. The other continents would be randomly sorted by computers. According to past rules, Rising Dragon would complete the voting in all 12 continents within 3 months. Fiery Bird would finalize the virtual idol spokesperson for all the continents before May. Usually, Fiery Bird would use the results of the online voting in Rising Dragon as a reference. Then they would pick the one they were satisfied with. Most of the time, the idol with the highest number of votes would be chosen as the spokesperson for the respective continent. According to the schedule, voting could be completed in 4 continents within a month. Yinzhou was in 6th place, so they had to wait until mid-February. Tell Fangzhou to complete the last movement before Founding Era Memorial Day. Uploaded on February 8th, Duan Shinji instructed. Every year, January 28th was known as the Founding Era Memorial Day. More than 500 years ago, the period of destruction officially ended and the new era began. It was also a day of global celebration and was the most important holiday in all 12 continents. According to global practice, people were given more than 7 days off. As for how much, it depended on the companies in each continent. Every year, Silver Wing set a 7-day holiday for its employees. However, those in the entertainment industry might not be able to enjoy themselves during the holidays. They might have to travel to various cities to participate in various celebrations and activities. It was the busiest time and the most profitable time. Even if they were asked to take a break, they would not be willing. The celebrities who were able to get a break during this festival were either unable to travel due to physical reasons, or they were already past their prime and no one invited them. Duan Shinji had originally planned to let Fang Zhao bring the Polar Light team to events to gain popularity, but after considering the production of the 4th movement, she decided against it. The most important thing now was to focus on completing the 4th movement. Celebrations were secondary. After Memorial Day, there were more important endorsement deals to fight for. That was what Silver Wing valued the most. As for Vice President Ming Tsang of the Yinzhou Music Association, Duan Shinji had already spoken to him. After the release of the 3rd movement, Ming Tsang took to Yinzhou's largest social media platform to express his excitement. Because of his son, Ming Yi, it was impossible for him not to express his personal feelings. Therefore, he would not post his opinion on the official website of the Yinzhou Music Association. Instead, he would comment on it in his own name. Ming Tsang was still very excited, but compared to the 2nd movement, he looked much better. His complexion was ruddy, and the dejected expression that had been associated with his son's illness had disappeared. He was smiling happily. Ming Ye's condition has improved. The medical team will continue to follow up. The attending doctor says the series is indeed effective in treating the whole virus, but the entire series, consisting of 4 movements, is a complete course of treatment. The medical team will probably have to wait until the full course of treatment is complete before they can make any breakthroughs. I will wait for the release of the 4th movement. Thank you, Polar Light. Thank you, Polar Light's team. After reading Ming Tsang's online comments, Duan Xinji's worries had dissipated. Some hospitals in Yinzhou had already labeled the 100-year period of destruction series as whole virus treatment songs. From a commercial standpoint, once the final results of the research confirmed that the series was indeed effective, the future of the series would be limitless. Tell Feng Zhao that the most important thing is quality. He has already completed the first 3 movements. The 4th movement will be much easier. As long as the quality is there, everything else will be fine. All he has to do is focus on completing the series. He won't have to worry about marketing and operations, Duan Xinji instructed her assistant. Then, what's the reply from Li Zhou? The assistant asked. Tell them that the rights to the 3rd movement have already been reserved outside of the platform. Over at Li Zhou, Zero's agent relayed the news to Silver Wing when he received Silver Wing's reply. What? It's already been reserved? They won't sell it even at a higher price? Zero was furious. Zero's agent nodded vigorously. 10 million to buy the soundtrack. He could see it as this young master's willfulness. But if he had to add more money, he would not add too much. Previously, Zero had said that it didn't matter how much money he had to spend to buy the full copyright of the song. But as someone who handled the young master's accounts, he would never spend more than 50 million to buy a single movement. From his point of view, this was absolutely not worth it and an irrational action. So when he received a reply from Silver Wing, he felt reassured. Silver Wing really isn't selling, Zero's agent emphasized. Then poach the composer. We can't. Silver Wing is too good at keeping it under wraps. Nobody in Yinzhou knows who the real composer is. Zero's agent was put in a difficult position. Poaching a composer was much more difficult than buying a song. Silver Wing wasn't a fool. Their attitude was clear from the way they were shielding the composer. Businessmen pursued profit. Everything they did was for the greater good. Silver Wing definitely had other plans. But that was a matter of the music industry. Silver Wing was just making a movie for fun. It wouldn't affect them much. Besides, they weren't even on the same continent. At worst, they could always buy the music from Silver Wing the next time they made a movie. Then we'll poach him when he's exposed. Didn't they say there were only 4 movements? We've already released 3, and the 4th won't be far off. As if recalling something, Zero suddenly laughed. Definitely not far off. Silver Wing wants Polar Light to fight for the endorsement rights. Online voting for a few famous virtual idols had already begun in Huangzhou. Zero, relying on his status as a direct descendant of the Renault family and the beloved grandson of the Li Zhou governor, had dug up information from Rising Dragon. Among the virtual idols competing in Yinzhou, Silver Wing had chosen Polar Light. It doesn't matter if we wait a little longer. Zero leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs. What's the rating for God of War? What about King of Snipers? 8-2. Ha 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 ha. Zero burst out laughing. Zero's agent had a gloating smile on his face. Why was he so happy? Because the rating for God of War was rising, while the rating for King of Snipers was dropping. It had dropped by 0. For in 3 days. For a movie that had a good reputation, it was a shocking drop. Someone commented online. I don't know why, but when I watch King of Snipers, I can't help but think of the soundtrack for the final battle in God of War. Actually, the soundtrack for King of Snipers isn't bad, but after watching God of War, I feel like it's lacking something. It was like eating a dish with a strong flavor that stimulated the taste buds, and then eating a dish that was meticulously prepared but less flavorful. The taste was a little different. Many people searched the internet for information on the soundtrack for God of War. They even asked Wireless Media to release the soundtrack as a single, but Wireless Media never responded. That is, until someone revealed that the most memorable soundtrack in God of War was actually one of the movements in a series released by a virtual idol from Yinzhou. Yinzhou? They actually found someone from Yinzhou? What's the name of the virtual idol? What's the title of the soundtrack? Let me search. Polar Light. Yinzhou's Polar Light. The soundtrack is from the third movement of the 100-year period of destruction, mission. Oh, right. In Yinzhou, all three movements of the 100-year period of destruction series are available for download, and it only costs 1 yuan. This kind of copyrighted music is actually available for download in Yinzhou. We can forget about it here in Lizhou. Many people were envious of Yinzhou. This kind of copyrighted music was usually custom-made. Other than in commercials and movies, it couldn't be found on public platforms. If you wanted to listen to it, you had to watch the commercials and the original video, unless the production company released another single. At this point, some people thought of Zero, the dumb but rich young master. Let young master Zero buy it. We've already bought the soundtrack. Let's buy the other copyrights as well. That way, everyone can listen to it. Zero read the comments and thought to himself, I want to buy it too, but Silver Wing isn't selling. Although a lot of people were interested in the score online, not everyone was willing to watch God of Warp for it. Lizhou did not have access to Mission either. Even if they had access to Yinzhou's music platform, they would only be able to listen to the first two movements. The third movement was out of the question. Silver Wing had set up restrictions that prevented people outside of Yinzhou from listening to it. Just when people in Lizhou thought they would never hear about Mission outside of the movie, a video went viral on the internet. The video was called Call of Mission. Yinzhou's army shocks the world. Yinzhou's military had selected rarely seen footage of the three armed forces training in combat. The filming technique was sharp and impactful, especially the part about the Air Force. It was gorgeous and domineering, and the soundtrack was like a stroke of genius. It made people's blood boil after watching it and made them want to rush to the battlefield. The video was a hot topic on the internet. Many people compared their own military's promotional videos and realized that, while it was fine on its own, compared to the Yinzhou version, it was a little weaker. Rongzhou netizens were so shocked that they dropped their melon seeds. Shocks the world? Did they ask our Rongzhou? Rongzhou was one of the 8 major continents and the 4 special continents. Yinzhou was one of the 8 major continents, and Rongzhou was one of the 4 special continents, home to the world's largest military training base and the headquarters of the Allied forces. The entire continent was under military management. Most of the people living there were descendants of soldiers, and the schools, from primary schools to universities, were all military schools. It was widely recognized as the continent with the strongest military power. No wonder people in Rongzhou were dissatisfied with the Yinzhou military promotional video going viral. Call of Mission? This is a fucking military recruitment video. Be more direct. Be more direct with your advertising. Yinzhou's military district is a small place, and it dares to call itself Shocks the World? While Rongzhou and Yinzhou netizens bickered, people from other continents watched from the sidelines. However, people from every continent knew that online bickering was useless. Could you fly over and start a fight? Since that wasn't possible, they would have to find another way to fight. See you at the Battle of the Century in October. Chapter 59. Yinzhou's military district turned a deaf ear to the doubts and arguments online. They paid no attention to the little squabbles of the netizens. Their objective was to publicize the might and grandeur of their military district and get more people from Yinzhou to enlist and serve conscientiously instead of coming up with all sorts of excuses and exploiting loopholes in the law to escape military service. It had to be said that Yinzhou's promotional video had indeed gone viral online. It had made its presence known, and Duan Qianji's husband, Hong Lu, had even received a commendation during a meeting. There was no need to doubt the contribution of the soundtrack. Clothes made the man, and videos needed sound to decorate. Yinzhou military's promotional video could not compare to Rongzhou's in terms of equipment and scale. However, the promotional videos of other continents did not become popular, while Yinzhou's were. This was the reason why different soundtracks gave different audiences different impressions. Why were so many big-budget movies, games, and advertisers willing to spend huge sums of money to customize a soundtrack? Don't think that they were at a disadvantage. The returns they received were much more than people could imagine. Yinzhou's military district was in the limelight, and Silver Wing did not suffer any losses. Continents other than Yinzhou had their own regions that strictly filtered commercial music, films, and other things. Some even blocked them from other continents to prevent them from threatening the entertainment circles of their own continents and affecting the interests of their own continents. But that was only for commercial items. Non-profit videos like the promotional video of a continent's military district could not be blocked, and nobody dared to. Silver Wing also took the opportunity to launch a global publicity campaign to set the pace. Otherwise, how could people from other continents have found out so quickly that the 4-minute soundtrack had come from the debut series of Polar Light, a virtual idol? The soundtrack drove even more popularity, and outside of Yinzhou, even more people searched for news about Polar Light and the 100-year period of destruction series. While promoting himself, he also helped his wife advertise. Major General Hong Lu was very happy. This was a win-win situation. Even the movie God of War, which was screening in Liezhou, had garnered even more attention. As a qualified hype team, Zero's agent and wireless media seized this opportunity to once again promote their own movie. Then, they took away the Best Original Score award for King of Snipers and almost caused the movie's ratings to drop below 8. Before the movie had been released, many people had speculated that King of Snipers would win a few awards. Among the biggest film awards in Liezhou, King of Snipers would probably win a few. However, when King of Snipers and God of War were released at the same time, many people knew that King of Snipers would lose the Best Film Score award. God of War, a bad film, had no chance of winning an award. The Chinese Film and Television Association wouldn't give them the award either, as they felt it was too embarrassing. But if they gave the award to King of Snipers, it would cause a huge controversy. So, many people knew that the Chinese Film and Television Association would give the award to another film, avoiding these two films that were at the peak of the storm. The investors behind King of Snipers were so angry that they vomited blood. They had also put in a lot of effort into the soundtrack. They had invested a lot of money to hire a famous copyrighted music team. They had planned to win an award for the soundtrack, but it was a pity that they had lost to Zero, that piece of shit. The investors had hired many professionals to criticize Zero's team for creating hype and deliberately discrediting Zero's team. Zero had publicly retorted during interviews. Yes, we are stinky dog shit, but even if we are a pile of dog shit, we still have our merits. Don't deny it all. Instead of spending so much time criticizing the wireless company's despicable behavior, it would be better to find out where we have gone wrong. Is it hard to admit defeat? Do you think you are the best in the world just because you are used to being arrogant? As for those who criticized God of War and said that netizens who watched God of War were all mentally retarded, Zero scolded them without fail. Look at how capable you all are. How can you feel superior just by watching a movie? If you are so capable, why don't you join the military and explore other planets? Zero wasn't afraid of being criticized by these people. No matter how harshly they criticized him, they couldn't deny that he had used a soundtrack that could steal an award from the other party. Although he couldn't compete with the other party in terms of box office, ratings, or awards, he was satisfied and happy that his soundtrack had stolen an award from the other party. Celebration. A raise. Zero's agent was also very excited, not just because he had stolen an award from the other party, but also because their movie had not only broken even, it had earned more than 60 million. Pure profit. This sort of income was nothing to other film industry peers, but Zero's agent was very excited. Given Zero's personality, which was to throw money at lousy movies to boost the popularity of others, not to mention profits, breaking even was their goal every time. This time, not only had they broken even, but after deducting all expenses, including the expenses for publicity and operations, they had earned more than 60 million. This was really a huge improvement. Sometimes, Zero's agent wondered if it would have been better if he had one mission, but it was only a fleeting thought before he threw it to the back of his mind. Over at Yinzhou, Fang Zhao was not paying attention to the global entertainment industry. He was working hard with his team. Even if Duan Qianji had not mentioned it, he had intended to get the project team to produce the 4th movement before Memorial Day. That way, they could have a relaxing Memorial Day holiday. Since the 3rd movement had been given to the Yinzhou military as the theme song for the promotional video, other than online downloads, there was no way it could be used anywhere else. television stations, video studios, advertising companies, and the like were not allowed to use the third movement. Using it would be considered copyright infringement, and they would see it in court. However, Silverwing had not charged a single cent for the third movement being used as the theme song for the promotional film. Duan Xinji knew that even if the Yinzhou military paid, it would not be as generous as Zero. Therefore, she was more than willing to use the third movement in exchange for other benefits. Some benefits would benefit Silverwing as a whole, while others would benefit Fang Zhao personally. While Fang Zhao was instructing Peng Pusong on vocal practice, Duan Xinji called him to her office on the top floor. "I have 2 things to discuss with you." Duan Xinji had chosen to speak to Fang Zhao personally instead of getting her assistant to inform him. First, the Yinzhou military's promotional film has garnered a lot of attention on the third movement. As she spoke, Duan Xinji turned on her screen and showed Fang Zhao a screenshot of the comments she had saved. Because of its popularity, more and more people realized that they could not understand the lyrics of the chorus in the third movement. What kind of language is this? Does anyone know? Our preliminary guess is that it is some ancient language, perhaps from the period of destruction. We'll have to get someone to explain. Is there anyone who studies linguistics online? Please explain. What Duan Xinji showed Fang Zhao were comments from people from various continents regarding the lyrics, as well as media reports. Many music students knew that some people were adept at using a few popular languages to express the ever-changing worldview of a song. However, if one was not careful, the mixture of languages could easily make the song even more difficult to understand. Therefore, without sufficient control, few people would attempt to express themselves in multiple languages. In addition to multiple languages, there was another form of music that completely transcended language control, using an unknown language to express itself. To put it bluntly, it was a self-created musical language. This kind of language might be meaningless in itself, just to complement the tune. Or it might be an ancient language that had been lost for a long time. Regardless of the situation, it might not be able to express anything clearly, but it could convey the same emotions and mood. However, in the absence of a clear answer, the only way to find out was to ask the composer himself. This was what people from all continents were discussing online. Previously, Duan Xinji had not noticed this because she had felt that the lyrics were secondary to the music, which was more attractive. Therefore, she had not seen the lyrics in the third movement. She had only listened to the tune and paid it no mind. She had only noticed it now that more people were talking about it. Right now, the company is using some means to create buzz and hype. We need to keep it a secret. So, for the time being, don't tell anyone what the lyrics in the third movement mean. Don't post any explanations online about the lyrics, Duan Xinji said seriously. Don't worry about that. Fang Zhao smiled. Because I don't know what it means either. Duan Xinji. Are you fucking kidding me? I've only heard of it before and thought it was a good idea to use it here. As for what it means, I don't know either, Fang Zhao said. After the end of the world, many languages and dialects that were not commonly used had disappeared. However, when Fang Zhao was composing, he recalled the words he had heard during the all-out war. Some were said by soldiers as they bid farewell to their friends and family. Some were shouted out on the battlefield. The people they said were no longer around. Fang Zhao did not know what they meant, but when he was composing, the first words that came to his mind along with the melody would be used in the movement. Then, during the recording, he would guide Peng Pusong to sing them out. Duan Xinji looked at Fang Zhao with an indescribable expression, the mind of an amazing artist. She really could not understand it, but perhaps it was this kind of person who could compose such an astonishing movement. Ahem, let's not talk about that for now. Let's talk about the second matter. Duan Xinji observed Fang Zhang's expression and said, the third movement, mission, was given to the Yinzhou Military Propaganda Department on behalf of Silverwing. We didn't charge them a single cent, even though Duan Xinji had told Fang Zhao about giving the third movement to the military and had gotten his approval. Duan Xinji still felt the need to clarify the stakes. In her opinion, Fang Zhao was still very young. Perhaps there were some things he couldn't figure out and was keeping to himself. Duan Xinji didn't want someone with such potential to harbor a grudge against the company. We didn't give it away for free. We also received a lot of benefits, some of which cannot be measured with money. Duan Xinji observed Feng Zhao's expression as she spoke. She realized that Feng Zhao remained calm throughout, as if she was just making small talk. Actually, Duan Xinji was overthinking things. Feng Zhao did not feel anything about the matter. He was willing to do it. The most important thing for him to compose these few movements was to let them see the light of day again. The benefits were also important, just not as much as the former. Feng Zhao also believed that as a businesswoman, Duan Xinji knew how to maximize profits, so Feng Zhao was not worried about losing out. Duan Xinji would certainly not skimp on money. And as Duan Xinji said, some privileges could not be bought with money. There are some things I can't tell you, but there is one thing I can tell you. Duan Xinji smiled. Other than some benefits, I used this opportunity to get you 10 spots for military service. As a citizen of the new era, it was unavoidable to fulfill certain obligations. Military service was an unavoidable step. Different types of soldiers, different locations, and different types of service. Some would be assigned to certain teams in the military and sent to distant planets for mining, while others would only be assigned to basic service jobs in urban areas and would not be required to serve in the military. Duan Xinji saw that Feng Zhao was interested, so she continued, I've checked. The other members of the Polar Light Project team have already served in the military during their university years. Only you, Feng Zhao, do not have any military service history in your file. So in the future, when you decide to serve, you can use the spots they give you to exchange for easier work. You don't even have to leave Qian City. During your 1-year military service, you can continue composing without being affected. And I've fought for 10 such quotas for you. Chapter 60. There were many ways to serve in the military. On the surface, those who served in the military would be divided according to their physical conditions. Those who were physically weak would be assigned to places that were more relaxed and did not have to leave the planet. Just as Duan Xinji had said, those who were in poor health might only be assigned to some urban grassroots to do some relatively easy voluntary work. However, these positions were limited. Most conscripts were randomly assigned, and more than 70% of them had to leave the planet. Every year, a large number of conscripts were sent to foreign planets. It was not a vacation. Besides the necessary training, they were also required to do manual labor. Therefore, most people were unwilling to be assigned to such places. Families with the means to do so would use certain means to fight for an easier assignment. This resulted in many shady deals taking place every year, especially in remote urban areas. Small places were even darker, and it could be used as a means of revenge. It had been more than 500 years since the founding of the new era. Many decisions had lost their original meaning. Even the people in the Yinzhou military would sometimes turn a blind eye. After all, it was no longer the period of destruction. Life had to be smooth in order to continue living happily, right? This phenomenon was not limited to Yinzhou. It existed on all continents. Feng Zhao had not completed his military service. With these quotas, he did not need to worry about being assigned to a harsh foreign planet. Duan Xinji naturally hoped that Feng Zhao would stay in Qian City. That would be beneficial to Silver Wing. The core of the Polar Light team was still Feng Zhao. Feng Zhao returned to the 50th floor from the top floor. Taking advantage of the afternoon break, he called the rest of the team over. Isn't the project meeting tomorrow? Zhu Wen yawned. He had just gotten ready for his afternoon nap. It's not a project meeting. I received a few military quotas, Feng Zhao said. Zhu Wen's drowsiness disappeared immediately. He perked up. It can't be what I'm thinking, right? The kind that gets preferential treatment? Rodney rubbed his hands together, his eyes shining. The others also stared at Feng Zhao, waiting for his reply. Feng Zhao nodded. That's right. Aha. Zhu Wen let out a weird cry. Why did I enlist in advance? Otherwise, I would still be enjoying special treatment. Why would I need to go mining on a foreign planet? Zhu Wen, you were assigned to mining too? Zheng Huang asked. Yeah, what else? Zhu Wen felt his skin tighten at the thought of his military service. But at the time, my family pulled some strings and spent $1 million to get the person in charge of distribution to send me to a nearby planet with a mature base. You're lucky. The planet I was assigned to didn't have good base conditions, and the weather wasn't good either. It snowed 4 times a year, and every time it snowed, it would last for the next season. Zheng Huang shuddered when he talked about his military service. Zheng Huang and I served in the military during our 3rd year. We completed our 3rd-year courses during our 1st and 2nd year. So when we came back, we immediately entered our 4th year of studies and didn't delay our graduation, Wan Yu said. However, Big Zhao, it seems like you haven't served yet. Usually, when students were in university, they would take a year off from school to serve in the military. This was because serving in the military after graduation would delay their work. When Fang Zhao's original self had been in university, he had been busy composing, striving for grades, fighting for awards, and dating, so he hadn't served. I've already served, but, boss. Fu Yingtian paused to organize his words. He had been introduced by Zhu Wan, so he wasn't as casual as Zhu Wan in front of Fang Zhao. Fu Yingtian called Fang Zhao boss like Zhu Wan. Seeing Fang Zhao look over, Fu Yingtian was a little nervous. I have a younger brother who is in his 3rd year of university this year. He only cares about coding and lacks exercise, so he's skinny. This year, his classmates have decided to take a year off for military service. He's very talented in reg space technology. It's just that when he gets busy, he forgets the time and often stays up late. That's why his physical fitness isn't that good. He even fell last year. Boss, you have a quota. I was wondering, could you buy one? Fang Zhao listened to Fu Yingtian and nodded. Seeing that Fang Zhao had agreed, Fu Yingtian relaxed. He had saved up quite a bit of money after joining the Polar Light Project. If he could use that money to buy a highly credible spot, it would be worth it. He had asked around the black market, but there was no way to buy a spot with money, and he might even be cheated. Given his younger brother's appearance, if he was assigned to a remote planet with poor conditions like the one Zheng Huang had mentioned, he might be sent back due to a serious illness midway through his military service. Military service wasn't a death sentence, but Fu Yingtian had experienced it and knew the suffering. If it was an absolutely fair distribution, then he wouldn't have said anything. He would have just followed the rules and followed the arrangements. But since everyone was using underhanded means, why should he be so virtuous? He hadn't done it before because he hadn't had the means. But now that he had the means, he could let those he cared about suffer less. Wasn't hard work all for the sake of creating a better life for himself and his family? How much? Fu Yingtian had wanted to ask how much a quota cost, but he heard Fang Zhao say, well, then I'll give you one. Anyone else? Fu Yingtian was dumbfounded. Zhu Wan and the others were like statues, staring at Fang Zhao motionlessly. After a few seconds, Zhu Wan took a deep breath. You mean, you're giving it to us? He then asked again in disbelief, are you really giving it to us for free? Fang Zhao nodded. Hold on, boss. Do you know what the black market price is? Zhu Wan rubbed his dark circles and suppressed his excitement. 10 million. Without waiting for Fang Zhao's reply, Zhu Wan said, the black market price is 10 million. Even the lowest is no less than 5 million. Back when I was doing my military service, I wanted to get my own quota, but I didn't have the money. Zhu Wan rambled on, but Fang Zhao only replied with 3 words. Got it? Got it, that's it. Zhu Wan stared. Fang Zhao looked at the others and said, how about this? Zhu Wan, Song Miao, Peng Pusong, Zheng Huang, Wan Yu, Fu Yingtian, Stiller, Zhang Yu. 8 of you. I'll leave one for each of you. You decide who you want, and let me know when you decide. Ha! Zhu Wan laughed heartily. Boss, I love you. He was about to give Fang Zhao a hug, but Fang Zhao threw him into the studio. I've given you all the benefits. Do your job well? Yes. I promise I'll complete the mission perfectly. Zhu Wan didn't even want to take a nap. He was very excited. If it wasn't for the fact that it wasn't appropriate to spread the news, he would have cheered in his group chat. Other departments gave out red packets, but their department gave out quotas. A military quota worth tens of millions. However, if their department needed it urgently, they wouldn't sell it to others. Fang Zhao's quota, even if they didn't need it now, would be worth it in the future. Peng Pusong couldn't wait to call his mother. Hello, Mom. I got a quota. Tell uncle and cousin not to worry. The cousin that Peng Pusong was talking about was his uncle's daughter. She was also old enough to serve, but her health was not very good and she often fell sick. His uncle had been worrying about borrowing money, and using his connections recently in order to get his daughter to a more relaxed place. Girls were not as unlucky as boys. They would suffer more if they were assigned to a place that was not as good as boys. Pang Pusong's uncle had helped him a lot when he had been playing small roles. Back then, he had been able to practice singing at Silver Wing thanks to his uncle's access card. That was how he had met Fang Zhao. So Pang Pusong was willing to give his quota to his cousin. 2 days later, Fang Zhao received a request from Pang Pusong and Fu Yingtian to inform Duan Qianji of their decision. Duan Qianji was a little surprised that Fang Zhao would give his quota to his subordinates, but she wouldn't interfere. "I'll get someone to take care of it for you." "So, Fang Zhao, what's your decision? When are you going to serve? Where do you want to serve?" Duan Qianji didn't care about the others. What she cared about was Fang Zhao's decision. "I'll finish the Polar Light project first," Fang Zhao said. "That's true. If Polar Light wins the endorsement, you'll be even busier. You probably won't be able to serve this year, but you're still young. You can serve after a few years. As long as there's a quota, you can serve any time within the time limit." Duan Qianji was thinking about where to place Fang Zhao in Qian City, preferably somewhere close to the company. She would never have guessed that Fang Zhao had spent the past 2 days looking up information on her planets and paying special attention to the farthest ones. If she had known, Duan Qianji would surely have taken back her quota. After returning to the department and informing Pang Pusong and Fu Yingtian, Fang Zhao filled Curly Hair's automatic feeder with dog food and was about to head to his office for a break when he received a call. "Big Zhao, what's up?" Zheng Huang asked as he came out of the bathroom and saw Fang Zhao standing at his office door with a strange expression. "I'll make a trip to the Qi and City Police Station in the afternoon." "What happened?" Zheng Huang was nervous. Who would be called to the police station for no reason? "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. I'll be right back." Zheng Huang was relieved to hear Fang Zhao say this. As long as nothing happened. Chapter 61. Fang Sheng had been arrested on charges of song theft and intentional injury. Fang Sheng hadn't had a good life since he was kicked out of neon culture. Because he didn't have much of a creative talent, he turned to music school students. Qian City had the best music schools. Other than the Qian Academy of Music, there were 2 other decent music schools. Many of the music students at these schools didn't have the best living conditions. Some took up part-time jobs, but the competition for music-related jobs was just as fierce. So some people chose other ways to earn money for their tuition and living expenses, not registering copyrights, but posting excerpts of their songs on certain platforms. After attracting buyers, they sold the copyrights to the complete songs. That was how some small-time stars got their original works. It was an open secret in the industry. Fang Sheng planned to buy some good works from students who were struggling but had some talent. He couldn't make a name for himself in Qian anymore, so he went somewhere further away and used the works he bought to make a profit. He specifically targeted students who seemed to be engrossed in composing but didn't know how to run a business. He swindled them out of their work at a low price. After collecting a little more, he took the work with him to another city. His targets all had personalities similar to the original owner of Fang Zhao's body. He was really addicted to robbing. Actually, it was because the shortcut was too fast. Just like when he had stolen 3 songs from the original owner of his body, he had a house and a car the moment he turned around. The feeling of getting rich overnight was too tempting. If Fang Zhao hadn't interfered, Fang Sheng wouldn't be doing so badly. Unfortunately, Fang Sheng's plan didn't pan out this time. The original composer turned the tables on him for stealing someone else's work. He was caught red-handed stealing someone else's work. The plaintiff even applied for a lie detector. Under the pressure of the lie detector and interrogation, Fang Sheng couldn't handle the pressure and confessed to stealing 3 songs from Fang Zhao. Fang Zhao arrived at the police station. After his identity was verified, he was taken to an interrogation room. This wasn't a place where suspects were interrogated, so it wasn't as stifling. The walls were transparent, so people walking around could be seen. There were also some relaxing snacks and tea on the side of the room. Fang Zhao, a square-faced man in his 40s, sitting there raised his head and asked, "I am." Fang Zhao sat down at the table, facing the man. "Did you bring the materials I told you to bring?" the man asked. "I brought it." Fang Zhao took out the notebook from his bag and handed it over. This notebook was used by the original owner of this body to compose music, and all the scores were recorded in it. The call Feng Zhao had received at the company had been for him to produce materials that could prove that he was the composer of the three pieces. The person in charge of the investigation and evidence collection took the notebook for verification. Current technology was able to determine the approximate date of the writing and whether it was composed at that time. Although Feng Sheng had admitted to stealing 3 songs from Feng Zhao, according to the rules, further proof was required. Of course, having the actual thing would be better. The person in charge of taking notes in the interrogation room noticed Feng Zhao looking outside. He turned his head and smiled. "Do you know who that guy in the blue checkered shirt and the 2 beside him are?" Feng Zhao looked across the table and asked, "Who?" "The crying girl is Wei Qian, a student at a music academy in the city. Her song was almost stolen by Feng Sheng. If it weren't for the secret code she used on the score to prove her identity as the original composer, her song would have been copyrighted. The guy in the blue checkered shirt in the middle is her brother, Yuqi. He's from Qi, an University of Science and Technology. When he found out his sister's song had been stolen, he went looking for Feng Sheng. He happened to see Feng Sheng secretly taking photos of someone else's complete draft. Yuqi kicked Feng Sheng there and called the police. This time, he borrowed money to hire a good lawyer. Multiple thefts, intentional assault, etc. I'm guessing Feng Sheng will be in jail for at least 10 years. You have to thank them. If they hadn't applied for a lie detector, we might not have been able to get you involved." The last time he had hired someone to steal Feng Zhao's bracelet, he had suffered heavy losses. So this time, Feng Sheng didn't dare hire someone else to steal the song. He did it himself. Unfortunately, he was caught red-handed stealing the score. "Hey, why didn't you sue him when your score was stolen?" The person asked Feng Zhao. "I couldn't sue him without evidence," Feng Zhao replied. "That's true. The kid is too cunning. He didn't leave any obvious evidence. We can't use a lie detector until he's found guilty." The person looked at Feng Zhao with pity. He knew his stuff had been stolen, but he couldn't do anything about it. All he could do was watch as the other party used the fruits of his labor to make money. It must have been hard. The forensics officer returned quickly and returned the notebook. The notebook served as proof. Feng Zhao filled out forms and signed his name. After all the procedures were followed, the composer of the 3 songs was no longer Feng Sheng, but Feng Zhao. Neon Culture had already taken the 3 songs Feng Sheng had stolen off the shelves when they received word from the police and returned the copyrights. "Can I go see Feng Sheng?" Feng Zhao asked. "Sure." Feng Zhao was taken to a temporary holding cell. That was where Feng Sheng was being held. "There's a headset." The person who had brought Feng Zhao over pointed out the earpiece to Feng Zhao and left. They still respected the privacy of their citizens. Feng Sheng looked haggard and dispirited. He didn't know what had gone wrong. He couldn't figure it out. Was it because he was unlucky? Everything was going according to plan. Everything should have gone smoothly. Why did things always go wrong at the critical moment? At first, Feng Sheng wanted to buy Wei Qian's song for $50,000. For someone like Wei Qian, who didn't understand the market and didn't have any means to make money, $50,000 was very tempting. It was enough for her to pay for 6 years of tuition and live a good life. Just as Wei Qian was about to sign the contract, a phone call from her brother made her hesitate. Feng Sheng didn't want to wait, so he stole Wei Qian's draft. Little did he know that Wei Qian's score contained a code. What was worse was that after he stole Wei Qian's score, he went to another school, got the student drunk, and stole the other person's score. Feng Sheng had wanted to buy the score at a low price, but the guy knew the market better than Wei Qian. He wouldn't sell for less than $150,000. Feng Sheng wasn't willing to pay that much. Hence, he decided to steal it again. He even planned to leave Qian City overnight after stealing the song. Unfortunately, he was caught red-handed by Yuqi. If he had a choice, Feng Sheng wouldn't have confessed to stealing Feng Zhao's song. But he knew he couldn't avoid a lie detector. If he didn't come clean, he might get a heavier sentence. After weighing the pros and cons, he chose to come clean. Since he couldn't hide, the worst he could do was spend 10 years in prison. If he performed well during the 10 years, he might get a lighter sentence. In the end, he might be released after 6 or 7 years. He would only be 30 then. He still had a long life ahead of him. Even though he'd lost all his money, he still had a chance to make a comeback. Fang Sheng tried to figure out how to deal with the situation. His face was still swollen, and he'd lost a few teeth. It wasn't a good feeling. As he was thinking, Fang Sheng saw someone bring Fang Zhao over. Fang Zhao, Big Zhao, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have stolen your song. Please forgive me, considering we grew up together. As long as Fang Zhao forgave him and put in a good word for him, Fang Sheng could apply for a lighter sentence. Even if it couldn't be a few years, a few months or weeks would still count as a lighter sentence. After yelling for a minute, Fang Sheng realized he couldn't be heard on the other side of the transparent barrier. He quickly picked up his earpiece and pointed to the earpiece hanging on the outside, gesturing for Fang Zhao to pick it up. He assumed Fang Zhao wouldn't know how to use it, but Fang Zhao didn't move. He just stood there, staring at Fang Sheng as if he were an emotionless stranger. Fang Sheng was suddenly reminded of the time he'd borrowed the company's car to move to a black street after signing with Neon Culture. He'd met Fang Zhao then. Fang Zhao had had the same look in his eyes. As if a clap of thunder had struck the dark night sky, Fang Sheng jerked his head up and stared in shock at Fang Zhao on the other side of the transparent wall. It's you? Fang Sheng looked like he'd seen a ghost. When he'd hired people to steal Fang Zhao's bracelet, he'd been robbed instead. He could say Yu Qing was helping Fang Zhao. Those people didn't want to offend Yu Qing, so they tried to rob him instead. But now, it was Fang Zhao. It was all Fang Zhao's doing. He'd let those two Blackstreet thugs rob him instead. Time and time again, just as he was about to succeed, Fang Zhao stopped his plans. Gritting his teeth, Fang Sheng stared at Fang Zhao on the other side of the barrier and spat out the words. You did it. He finally understood. He hadn't thought about it before because he'd been following Fang Zhao's personality. But now Fang Zhao was like a different person. Coincidence? Luck? It was all bullshit. Fang Sheng's face was pale. His eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists as if he wanted to crush his earpiece. But soon, the hatred in his eyes turned to fear. He saw Fang Zhao smile at him. It looked like a casual smile, but it made Fang Sheng feel like he'd fallen into an ice cave. His blood froze. If all of this had been arranged by Fang Zhao, would there be anything else waiting for him in prison? The more Fang Sheng thought about it, the more terrified he became. Let me out. Let me out. Fang Sheng screamed in terror. On the other side of the barrier, Fang Zhao didn't look at him. He left. Fang Zhao walked out of the temporary detention center, grabbed a file, and left the police station. He walked down the street, turned a corner, and ran into Yuqi, who was waiting for him. The balance has been received. The lawyer's fees have been paid, Yuqi said. Fang Zhao had been keeping an eye on Fang Sheng. When he learned that Fang Sheng had targeted Wei Qian, he'd sent for Yuqi and struck a deal. Fang Zhao was in charge of the money, and Yuqi was in charge of setting Fang Sheng up. You're not going to tell your sister? Fang Zhao asked. Yuqi's sister, Wei Qian, had no idea that her draft had been stolen. Yuqi had purposely created an opportunity for Fang Sheng. Later, Yuqi had seized the opportunity to catch Fang Sheng while he was stealing someone else's score. I'll definitely tell her, but not now. This incident is to teach her a lesson. There's an old saying that goes, don't hurt people, but don't let your guard down. She took the bait the moment it was thrown. She was too gullible. Girls like her only care about composing and don't know how to guard against people. She'll be at a disadvantage once she leaves school. I can't protect her all the time. By the way, thank you for your help. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come out unscathed. Fang Sheng carried a knife with him. If Fang Zhao hadn't gotten someone to help him in the dark, Yuqi wouldn't have come out unscathed during the arrest. Yuqi checked the time. I have to go. They're waiting for me. The next time there's this kind of scam or justice, remember to call me. Fang Zhao watched Yuqi leave, then continued walking. To him, Fang Sheng was just a small interlude. He had only helped the original owner of the body get back the song's copyright. Whoosh, a flying car stopped at the intersection up ahead. Fang Zhao glanced at the license plate. It was the taxi he'd booked in advance. He hurried over and got in. To Yinzhou Cemetery for Martyrs? The driver asked. Yeah, Memorial Day is almost here. There are a lot of people at the cemetery. I've already made 2 trips today. Are there a lot of people every year? Fang Zhao asked. Chapter 62. Yinzhou Cemetery for Martyrs mainly buried martyrs from the Qi and war zone during the period of destruction. After the establishment of the new era, another batch of graves had been moved over from other parts of Yinzhou. According to official data, there were tens of millions of people buried here. Most of the corpses had been cremated and compressed, so they only took up a small space. There were also some people who didn't even have a corpse left behind, only some belongings from when they were alive, or just a written record of their name. People in the new era had a habit of going to the Cemetery of Martyrs every year around Memorial Day to pay their respects. Some people believed that after paying their respects, the martyrs would bless them with their wishes, while others simply followed tradition and paid a visit. Just as the taxi driver had said, because Memorial Day was approaching, there were indeed more people at the Cemetery for Martyrs. While on the road, Fang Zhao had been prompted by the driver to get a number online and queue up. The Cemetery for Martyrs had a designated area for paying respects, but space was limited. Every year during Memorial Day, it would be full, so he had to queue up. There were too many people paying their respects, and Fang Zhao's number was slightly behind. He would probably have to wait another 2 to 3 hours before it was his turn. However, before that, Fang Zhao planned to take a stroll around the other parts of the Cemetery for Martyrs. As he neared the cemetery, Fang Zhao could see a huge 500-meter-tall tombstone in the distance. This was the landmark of the area. The taxi driver only dropped Fang Zhao off near the cemetery. Because there were too many people, the parking lot was full, and there were still some cars queuing up on the road. Occasionally, Fang Zhao could see armed police patrolling. Every year at this time, a large number of police officers would be transferred over to maintain order. Seeing this, Fang Zhao decisively got out of the car. He could enter faster if he walked. There was no charge to enter the cemetery. All he had to do was check his identity. If there were no issues with his identity and the number of people in the cemetery was within the limit, he could enter directly. The roads outside the cemetery were very crowded, but once inside, it felt much more spacious. The cemetery was huge and was divided into several areas. The cemetery's core area, the period of destruction memorial hall, the plaza, the scattered graves area, the public worship area, and so on. The huge tombstone was part of the cemetery's core area and couldn't be casually entered. Most people who came here would head to the public worship area to pay their respects before heading to the tea houses and taverns at the side of the plaza to have tea and chat. The descendants of the martyrs would go to the scattered graves, or the core area of the cemetery to pay their respects. Walking along the wide avenue, there were sidewalks on both sides of the avenue and shaded by trees. The species of the trees were Longxiang Tianluo, evergreen all year round. Even though Qi and City had already entered the cold winter, the trees were still green and full of vitality. In front of the main road was the square of the cemetery. One could see many people walking around with their families. The shops on the side of the square were bustling with customers. Apart from the solemn moment when they paid their respects, most of the time, be it when they were walking on the square or resting in the tea house, the people who came were mostly smiling. This was not a sign of disrespect to the martyrs. At the beginning of the new era, there had been a requirement that the cemeteries be solemn and respectful, but that had changed later on. Before his death, a general who had been born during the period of destruction had told his descendants to smile more when they paid their respects to him. The new era that he and his comrades had fought so hard for wasn't for the sake of seeing them weep and weep. Therefore, gradually, people no longer deliberately put on a solemn face to pay their respects. Memorial Day was a day of celebration. Even if people came here to pay their respects, it was with a sense of celebration. They thanked the martyrs of the period of destruction for bringing peace to the new era. After the end of days, the people of the new era saw the people buried in the ground as their religion. These people were their saviors. The elderly would pray for the younger generation during their prayers. The younger generation hoped that their wishes would come true. They prayed for peace, marriage, fortune, and so on. There was still plenty of time to line up at the public memorial area. Fang Zhao did not head there. Instead, he crossed the square and headed for the core area where the tall tombstone was located. "Are you a descendant of the martyrs? Please show me your identification," the receptionist at the core area asked Fang Zhao. "No. Apologies, sir. You are not a descendant of the martyrs buried in the cemetery. If you wish to enter the core area, you will need to verify your identity and pay a $1,000 security deposit. Would you like to enter? The receptionist asked. The security deposit would not be refunded. This rule also stopped most people from entering. The core area of the cemetery was more important. It was not suitable for everyone to enter. Therefore, this rule was made after careful consideration by the park. The money paid by non-martyrs to enter the core area would be used for the maintenance of the park. It would not be pocketed by private individuals. Yes. Fang Zhao submitted his identity information. After the verification, he paid a $1,000 security deposit. The receptionist put a blue bracelet on Fang Zhao. It was used to pinpoint Fang Zhao's location and ensure that he would not wander off to places he was not supposed to. Most people who entered the core area of the cemetery were given bracelets. Different colors had different meanings. Blue represented ordinary worshippers, red represented descendants of martyrs, white represented civil servants, and black represented people with special status. Although he had to pay an additional fee, when Fang Zhao entered, he discovered that there were quite a number of people wearing the same blue bracelets as him walking around. However, there were surveillance cameras and police watching the surroundings. Those people had to think twice before doing anything. The most obvious feature in the core area was the tall tombstone. People beside it seemed minuscule. The huge grayish-white tombstone was like a pillar supporting the land. It stood there silently but resolutely. After 500 years of wind and rain, it was solemn and proud. Fang Zhao stood in front of the tombstone and looked up for a long time before withdrawing his gaze. He walked around the tombstone and walked behind it. Behind the huge tombstone were rows of smaller tombstones. With the big tombstone as the apex, they were arranged in a fan shape and extended backward. Each of these small tombstones represented a person who had passed away. The first row, which was also the row closest to the big tombstone, had 10 tombstones. They were slightly bigger than the tombstones behind. The tombstones closer to the front were bigger because the bigger the tombstone, the more words were engraved on them and the more important they were. Starting from the left, the first tombstone was that of founding-era Great General Wu Yin. The word Yin in Yinzhou was taken from his name. The 11 great generals of the founding era, other than Huangzhou, where the alliance headquarters were located, the other 11 continents were named after their surnames or names. For example, Lizhou was named after the founding-era Great General Ha-One Renault. After them, the alliance no longer had a great general military rank. Wu Yin, 17 years of the period of destruction, 56 years of the new era, founding-era Great General, second commander of the 5th Division, recovered Yinzhou. Wu Yan's tombstone had a brief description of his life, fully embodying the awe-inspiring and domineering nature of a general who had ended the calamity and created the new era. Fang Zhao smiled faintly as he read the official text. Probably nobody knew that Wu Yin was actually afraid of dogs. He just hid it well. As he continued walking forward, the smile on Fang Zhao's face disappeared. The second tombstone read, Fang Zhao? 99 years of the period of destruction, first commander of the 5th Division. The 5th Division was the predecessor of the Yinzhou military. The 5th Division had been established during the later stages of the period of destruction. After the founding of the era, it had become the Yinzhou military of the new era. In the new era, people used a new chronological system. The period of destruction began in the year of the period of destruction and ended in the year of the founding of the new era, lasting 102 years. 99 years of the period of destruction. According to the history books of the new era, after the most difficult period of the period of destruction, 99 years of the period of destruction, by the 100th year of the period of destruction, most of the threats had been eliminated. The next 2 years had been spent cleaning up the remnants and rebuilding the homeland. It had really been just one step away. Fang Zhao's gaze moved down from the tombstone. It seemed like he was buried under this tombstone. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.